and welcome to City of Pasco City Council Workshop Meeting. The council thanks you for being part of our city government. At workshop meetings, the council discusses issues, but no formal action is taken. Agenda packets are available on the City of Pasco's website at www.pasco-wa.gov/agenda. This meeting is also being televised live on PSC-TV, channel 191, on Spectrum Cable in Pasco and Richland, and is streamed on the city's Facebook page, website, YouTube channel, and GoToWebinar. This and previous council meeting video is available on the city's website. Lastly, the public may submit their comments and or questions by contacting the city manager, city clerk, or by using the Ask Pasco app. And with that, can I get roll call, please?
Yes, council members Campos,
Present.
Milne,
Present.
Roach,
Present.
Serrano,
Here.
Torres,
Present.
Mayor Pro Tem Maloney,
Here.
and Mayor Barajas.
Present, thank you. And with that, if you would like to follow us for the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you for that. And there we go. All right, and moving on to item 4 on the agenda, any verbal reports from council members that you attended any meetings? Councilman Campos?
Seems like I've had all the updates. The BFT board is moving forward as best we can to try to come to an agreement on a new building. There seems to be discussion. A lot of us are new to the board, and we're trying to get a feel for whether or not the best course of action is to put a stay on building a new building, given the uncertainty with, procuring building items and stuff like that. So it's been a very interesting few meetings, and we expect it'll probably continue that way for quite some time. So.
Perfect, thank you. Mayor Pro Tem Maloney?
Thank you. On Friday, I went down to the ribbon cutting for the Peanuts Park. Beautiful update, wide open spaces. A lot of people attended. Very exciting project, and like I said, it looks great. And so with the new amenities we have, I think it will be a very good draw for the downtown. I also had an opportunity to drive past it last week as I went on my way over to the community listening forum over in Salon La Playa, and had an opportunity to hear from the public there as well. So I can speak to the public market. The Peanuts Park is nice, very well lit at night, and so hopefully it'll stay in good working order, and we can take some of that brightness at that center point and help spread it over to more of the alleys, more of the buildings, and cover more of the area. So a couple really exciting things. I will say that there was also a festival on Saturday down at Peanuts Park, and that was also seemed well attended and already seeing some good use out of the space. So, thank you.
Councilmember Torres?
And I'll second Councilmember Maloney as well. I attended on Friday the ribbon cutting, and then on Saturday I also went and checked out the bazaar and all the vendors that were there and bought me some tamales. So hopefully some of you also got to attend it as well. And on Friday morning, I participated in a tour at Fire Station 83. Hardworking men there. Really had a good time with them, getting to know them and hearing their stories and what they deal with on a daily basis. So I want to thank our firemen for that. Thank you.
Thank you for that. No other comments? Go ahead, Councilmember.
Yes, since we're all chiming in, again, I really also enjoyed the Peanuts Park grand opening, and I was really impressed. I thought it turned out a little bit better than I had hoped or I expected, so I was really impressed. And yes, we need to light up Pasco and make it look as safe and possible. And again, I'm looking forward to seeing how things turn out, and looking forward to our retreat here in a couple weeks. So yes, it was good. And Blanche Ross our mayor was there, and she did the good ribbon cutting, and it was a good time.
Thank you. I was going to save my comments for last. So yes, again, great ribbon cutting, great attendance. Thank you all that were there. Visit Tri-Cities was there. A lot of our local business owners were there as well our, as our fire department, our police department, staff. Great attendance again. I do feel that we're going to have a great participation from our collaborators, from our partners, and from our local business owners coming by and making the best of use of that facility. So great event again. Anyone else wish to make any more comments? No further comments. So we'll move on to item 5, items for discussion. And item 5A, visit Tri-Cities 2021 Annual Report, 2022 Work Plan, and Tourism Promotion Area Reserve Fund Request. City Manager.
Good evening, Mayor, Council. Provide the annual report for Tri-City Visitor and Convention Center and also the TPA assessment request. Michael Novakovic, Executive Director.
Thank you.
Council and Mayor Barajas, thank you so much for.
Just push the button on it.
How about that? There we go. Back it up. Excellent. Mayor Bras, Council, City staff, thanks so much for giving me a few moments tonight. I should tell you, at Peanuts Park, City Manager Dave Zabel was talking to my team and said I had 30 minutes, so I plan on exhausting all of that this evening. True story, it's true. Now, we're going to run through our annual report, kind of a 2021 year in review as it related to tourism and our activities at Visit Tri-Cities. High-level look at our work plan because it really gets down into the weeds, detailed, but TPA Reserve Request, of course, we come every spring and present these to you. TPA, one of the many acronyms we use, Tourism Promotion Area. Just a reminder, that's a $3 per room night assessment that our hoteliers collect that visitors pay. This was an assessment that the hoteliers voted in on themselves, and those dollars are used to market our region. So as we take a look at what happened, you're actually looking at 2020 numbers. We'll actually get the full impacts from 2021 in May of this year. So 2020, 30% downturn from 19. 19 was our best year ever in tourism, not only in the Tri-Cities, but as an industry on whole. But as you can see, it's still pretty significant impact for our community. So visitors, of course, show up with dollars in their pockets, spend money staying in our hotels, eating at our restaurants, taking our attractions, purchasing from our retail, pumping gas, buying groceries, and drinking a lot of wine. And that helps support a lot of local businesses. It can help attract new business. And as you can see, supports a lot of jobs in our community. Also generates a significant amount of tax revenue that helps lower your and my tax burden. Not bad news at all, but it helps to fund things like police, fire, schools, teachers, the maintenance of our roads, beautifications of our parks, and so much more. So when you look at that total picture, it helps to build a safe, educated, employed, and beautiful community filled with many, many amenities that literally touches every Tri-City in some form or fashion. So it's a great deal. We appreciate you investing in it. You're going to see here in just a second as we look at hotel occupancies and tax revenue generation, how much we rebounded in 2021. So we're expecting to see, when we see this full picture here in a couple of months, that 2021 was a pretty significant year for us. Probably not back to 19. Not probably. I can assure you it wasn't at 19 levels, but it was a good return, and we've got more on the way. So when we take rooms sold, if you look down there to Pasco, you can see 2020 versus 2021. We actually had an 18% increase year over year. For the whole community, we saw a 45, almost 46% increase, which is great news, but we were coming back from a pretty significant deficit. When you look at the hotel, motel, lodging taxes that are collected, particularly when you look at Pasco, look at 2021 down there on the bottom. And then look back up to 2019. You actually had a better year, surprisingly. The other communities bounced back pretty solidly, but when you look at the totals on the far right, that bottom right corner, you'll see we're not quite at 19 numbers, but it did come back significantly, particularly when you look at that 2020, which was pretty devastating. So when we talk about the return of our business, of course, leisure has really been what we've been building back tourism on. But our group business, so meetings, conventions, and sports. So business travel of any form or fashion, the expectation is we're not going to fully recover until 2024. So we have an uphill climb with that. So that would be our meetings and conventions business. Although right now we're seeing a lot of activity, which is pretty encouraging. And we have a TPA Reserve Request related to that we think can help us bring it back even faster. Sports, however, were really a bright spot for us. So as soon as the state opened up that we could put teams on the field last spring, because we were still shut down, it was game on. So Hector Cruz over here is our vice president. He oversees our sports. He was very, very busy. I should introduce too, right next to him is Gretchen Guerrero, our director of operations, and Vijay Patel, which is one of your hotel commissioners here in the city of Pasco, and he owns A1 Hospitality. He's also one of my treasured board members. Wink, wink. Yes, greatly appreciate this man. No, he's dynamite. You're going to hear a little bit more about the TPA and the Hotel Motel Commission here in just a moment. But sports truly were solid. We had a great year last year. It's coming on strong this year. And as you can see, if you look at that bottom bullet, $24.3 million in future visitor spending. So we have booked business. So our teams, the group business, we sell futures 1 to 5 years in advance. So the work we're doing today is paying dividends tomorrow and downstream.
Hey, Michael, before you jump, can you go back
Sure.
one more? Okay, so you touched on this about the positive trend for all three cities, but specifically in Pasco. Was there anything that's attributable to why Pasco tended to actually trended above where it was pre-pandemic?
Yeah, good question, council member. So it could be a multiple of things. I'm actually going to phone a friend over here and see if BJ might have some insight. But some things to consider is one of the things that we noted, particularly in 2020, our hoteliers were charging less in rate. So that we were able to charge more in 2021, which held part of it. You would think it would be event specific. I think sports, actually Hector might know, would be a key contributor. But BJ?
Thank you for that question. Excellent question. We had almost 100 rooms added into City of Pasco, which is the Courtyard by Marriott. And if Michael forgot to mention, we have the two of the best hotels in Tri-Cities, and both in Pasco, so that's good. You didn't mention that. But I would add to that Pasco is doing better than 2019 because of the new 100 rooms, 99 rooms added, plus the events are coming back. And I'll tell you our numbers for the first 2 months of this year, we are about 18% above last year. So this year, the numbers, when you see next year comparing to all these years, are going to be the best ever. So we are on the right track, and thanks to Michael and his team doing wonderful work, bringing events and sporting events, and that's really helping hoteliers, heads in beds.
I appreciate that. If you can stay just for one more second, that Marriott by the airport, are you finding that there's a lot of conferences that attend that, or mostly business travel? I mean, do you have ability to track that?
That's another good question. Airport has started getting busy, so we are seeing a lot of airport traffic at that hotel. Plus, we have small meeting space, so we've been getting some corporate business, having weekday meetings, and weekends we send our overflow from our Road 68 Hotel Holiday Inn Express into Courtyard. So instead of them going towards Richland, now we can direct them the other direction and have the revenue stay in Pasco. So that's been helpful.
Thank you very much.
Any other question while I'm here?
Would you like to finish my presentation? I'm so glad. Oh,
I don't
BJ's
object,
dynamite.
Michael.
Thank you. No, it's great. Well, and you heard it here first. The two best hotels in the Tri-Cities are located here in Pasco. So I'm not going to go into the detail on all of these numbers. Some of them are pretty big to comprehend unless you're working in this space all the time. But what I do want to mention is the travel writers. So last year, with COVID, it was a lot of ups and downs. On a good year, we'll get 16 to 20 travel writers in town. We were really happy to have 10 travel writers in town. 70 stories were written about the Tri-Cities. The impressions were pretty solid. I'm going to be telling you about an event that the city of Pasco is investing in that's going to rip the lid off of those numbers here in just a little bit. Super excited about it. We are all over the socials, of course. This is where we deliver a lot of our messaging. But even our website, everything leads back to our website. But our website did really well last year when you look at unique visitors, so 231,000. However, when you look at 19, we're up over 300,000. But we've got some new tools and tactics to bring back that website activity. And why that matters is we're creating compelling reasons for people to come to the Tri-Cities for a visit. So during the pandemic, we actually made some tough decisions early on when the stay-at-home, stay-safe order happened in 2020 to preserve cash and then we were really good with our expenses. And what we did is we took those dollars and reinvested them in digital technology. So we would have been doing this eventually, but it made really good sense to do this during the pandemic as everybody moved to their screens, right? So we got in front of them. We developed a brand new website. If you haven't checked it out, I encourage you to do so. A lot of cool technology there. Travel trip itinerary planner is on the website. We have a photo gallery that is it's user-generated content driven, meaning that it sources photos from Instagram of other people's accounts. We get their permission to use it. So it's authentic experiences being had by residents and visitors that we can showcase to others to compel travel. SkyNav is on our website. It's a 360-degree virtual tour, so it's bird's eye views via drone. You can come down street side, go inside businesses. Kula is also another 360-degree platform. So we launched this to support our group sales endeavors. So when travel came to a grinding halt, and again, our teams are working on selling futures, we're working with decision makers across the U.S. So normally we travel across the U.S. as well. But what we did with Kula is we could show infrastructure, so like the Hapo Center or the Pasco Red Lion in their meeting space, or hotel properties like BJ's, and our sports infrastructure to these decision makers without them coming to the Tri-Cities to sell. So now what we're doing is we can bring people in, but we can reach a larger audience and take the Tri-Cities to them. So it's one of the ways that we're looking to bring back our business. Datafi is a data analytics platform that uses geolocating information, as in it tracks your cell phone, so we can see where people came from. Let's say it's a residential area in Seattle somewhere. We can get demographic information related to that neighborhood. So it might be it's a family neighborhood with household incomes of a certain level. We can see where they went to when they come to the Tri-Cities, and it even marries up credit card receipts in an aggregate fashion so we can better understand their spend. It helps us hyper-target our marketing. Bandwango is a virtual city pass. You can download it on your phone. We have an indoor adventures pass going on right now. Last year we had a wine pass. Ales and Tales, so it's craft beverages with your dogs on the patios, places you can do it in the Tri-Cities, and we're developing new products this year. And True Omni is our new kiosk platform. So we'll be doing updates at the Tri-Cities airport. We have other kiosks around town. What we hope to do, maybe next year, is do outdoor kiosks in all three cities at high traffic areas. So it's not only learning a little bit more about the Tri-Cities, but it's directing people kind of like wayfinding, where they can go into the community, have a great time, and of course, drive economic impact while they're here. We have a lot of publications. I'm certainly not going to read them to you or go through this full list, but what I will tell you is by the end of the month, we're going to have our new visitor guide out. We changed the format. It's a lifestyle publication, so instead of having all the directory listings we used to have, we have writers from outside the area are looking at the Tri-Cities through a different lens and writing about it, and it's really, really cool content. Can't wait to get that in your hands and the hands of our visitors. This is where I'm going to spend the balance of that half hour that Dave Zabel had promised. We're going to go into the minutia of our work plan. Would never ever do that to you. But these are the tools and tactics we use. So everything from our broadcast buys, digital placement, the councils and committees we run, sales activities, all of it's listed there. I believe it's in your packet. Happy to answer any questions you might have. Where I did want to spend a couple of minutes, though, is talking about the Tpa Reserve Request. So the Tri-City Hotel Motel Commission, City Manager Dave Zabel is an ex officio, and of course, VJ is one of your commissioners for the city of Pasco, as is Monica Hammerberg. There's two commissioners per each city with hotels, so Richland, Pasco, Kennewick. They oversee the TPA funds, but when it comes time to reserves, for the dollars that we had in revenues, that revenues exceed our expenses, they go into a reserve account. Something you don't see here is $500,000 we keep in a separate account in case we have some kind of incredible event happen like a pandemic, so we can keep the lights on at Visit Tri-Cities because we are selling futures. We did not touch those dollars during the pandemic, which was a real blessing, but they are sitting in a reserve account. We do have $1.1 million available for investment. Of those, about $550,000 is already a pre-approved project, so they would have came in front of council. They're in varying degrees of completion. We have $575,000 available for reinvestment. So TPA dollars through RCW, their intention is to drive promotion of tourism to bring people into our community. So it's the desire of the Hotel Motel Commission and certainly my staff to put those dollars to good use. Every year we get together, come up with a list of activities, and then of course present them to you for your approval. We have $428,000 worth of endeavors that we are presenting today. And again, we have $575,000 available. I believe you have some detailed descriptions in your packet. What I thought I'd do, rather than going through all of these, I would like to highlight three of the bigger ticket items. If you look at that second bullet there, convention sales manager, $80,000. That's a fully burdened employee for 12 months in a sales manager role. We budget in September, not knowing where this was going to go or what it would look like when we came out. We were real cautious with staffing, so the staff's been sprinting. We believe we can bring back and beat industry expectations on group business by bringing an additional staff person back. So that's an unbudgeted position. If you go about halfway down, you see photo and video production, 100,000. So what we would do is bring in a production team to do both for about a 2-week period, and it's creating content that's on caliber with tier 1 destinations, so the Seattles of the world, but some really cool things too. So on the photo front, we found we were building our website. We've got a great photo library, but it was not only time to refresh, but we needed more content. Everything is so visually driven. Same thing with video, the little snippets. We can put together pitch videos on for a number of different endeavors, including workforce development. But what we'd like to do with this as well is some short form video, which is pretty new in industry. You're seeing bigger destinations do it because it's pretty expensive. It's making mini movies, and it's actually doing it through the tourist's lens. So you're hearing these stories from these families that are having experiences. It's really cool. If you go down from the third bullet up from the bottom, the Tread Map app. So the state of Washington Tourism, which is the contracted marketing arm for the state, promoting the state around the world, has partnered with Tread to develop this app. And what they're doing is they're doing matching funds. So to develop this for our community, it's $30,000 our investment per county, and then the state will also, state of Washington Tourism will match us $30,000 per county. So our investment $60,000, the state will match us another $60,000. This Tread Map app, it's all trails. So whether it's dirt trails for hiking and biking, or paved trails for hiking, biking, running, walking, whatever you might do, over the water trails as well. They'll have these out there for people to use. There's real-time user updates. So let's say somebody was having a trail that was overcrowded, maybe the parking lot was full. We can send people to less traveled trails, which is great. If somebody breaks into a car in a parking lot, those notifications go out, rattlesnake on a trail, maybe the hill's on fire. The cities can pump a message out there. So it works with land managers, it'll work with our jurisdictional partners, and it'll work with users. Somebody that's in Wenatchee that's enjoying a trail and looking for an experience can find trails in the Tri-Cities, and we can pull people here. So there's a lot going on with that app. Again, a lot of items on that list, and $428,000 worth of reinvestment there. And then finally, TBEX, Travel Bloggers Exchange. It's the largest gathering of content creators in North America. We're bringing them to the Tri-Cities in April. You are one of our premier sponsors. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Matter of fact, our closing night reception is happening here in Pasco. We hope you come out. It's going to be at Peanuts Park, so we're going to be lighting that place up. Here's the deal with TBEX. I mentioned we brought in 10 travel writers. Good year for us is around 20. We're going to have over 200. Other communities that have hosted this have experienced 5 to 20 years worth of travel writer impact in one fell swoop. So it's pretty exciting. That's what I had for you this evening. Happy to answer any questions you have about our initiatives or those TPA reserve requests.
Excellent presentation. Thank you
Thank
for
you.
your information. Any questions or comments from our council members? Mayor Pro Tem Maloney.
Thank you, Mayor Barajas, and thank you, Michael. As always, an energetic and good showing, which is exactly what we need here in the Tri-Cities is more cheerleaders, right? That's what we seem to be missing a lot of time. I'm going to ask a minutia question, so
go
my
for it.
apologies. Though I will say I appreciate the small item for including a little bit of taco crawling down in downtown for some of our visitors. So always a great opportunity to highlight the local businesses and local food. So this is related to some other conversations we've been having as a city. Is something like a quarter of the hotels and motels are currently in the Tri-Cities are being slated for SROs. And do you expect that is going to affect your TPA funding? Because I assume that those additional $3 per night is on all hotels and motels within the region. Is that correct?
Over 40 rooms. For sure. So the hope, we're not at full occupancy, so the hope is we're going to find some people finding their way into other properties, so we'll have higher occupancies, which is good news. We'll also, when we see that if they're going to other properties, we're going to have higher lodging tax collection, which is also great news. But it is a challenge when we look at citywide events. Some of the properties that we've lost, there's some big properties and some other ones that are being considered that we might have put sports teams in, for instance. I hope this is the long-term view as we lose some of these properties that are taken out, that we'll have some developers that see a real opportunity here and want to invest, and we'll get fresh inventory. So there is potential for that, for sure. My hope is a chunk of that will actually see offset by moving those people into other hotels. Great question, though. Thank you, Mayor.
Okay,
Pro Tem.
appreciate that. 'Cause when we're looking at potentially drawing down further on, I understand you have the emergency reserve, fantastic, the good fiduciary responsibility there. But when we're looking at drawing down some of the other ones, if we're going to see a significant dip in your overall funding, I'd be worried that we're going to miss out on some projects later that may be higher priority than some of these. But it sounds like you think that things are going to be all right, and that's not going to be an issue.
I do. So the other thing that's going to help us too is we increased the cap in Washington State for TPA collections. It was the beginning of last year. And then in April, we started taking those collections. So we're actually seeing if we can get back up to the volumes we had before our TPA, I think we're going to beat budget this year, which is great. The other thing I will note too, our previously approved projects, we can get together with commission and retire those. So if we ever found ourselves in a spot that we thought maybe that wasn't the right investment today, we can always retire the project and then put those monies back into reserve.
All right, great. Thank you very much. Like I said, as always, great presentation, and continue to support your efforts to keep people coming.
Thank you. Love it. Yeah, well, we appreciate the partnership.
Thank you. Any further questions or comments? Looks like there's none. Again, thank you so much for the presentation. Excellent information.
Thank you.
We do look forward to the 21st
Yes.
event. And so just thank you again.
Yeah, thank you all. Have a good evening.
Perfect. And so with that, we move on to item B on the agenda, the Benton Franklin Council of Governments presentation. City Manager.
Good evening, Mayor and Council again. Executive Director Michelle Holt from BFCOG will be here to talk a little bit about the COG's mission and just familiarize the Council with the activities of the Council of Governments.
Thank you.
Good evening, Mayor, Council, and City staff. This is my first opportunity to address your city. My name is Michelle Holt. I am the Executive Director at Benton Franklin Council of Governments, and I joined the COG staff 1 year ago and am a transplant to Tri-Cities. So it has been an interesting year to learn about our communities, our counties, as a new Tri-Cities resident. So when I talked to our board of directors at our last meeting, I asked them, when I have a chance to address our councils and our member jurisdictions, what is the most important thing that I can share with them? And they unanimously said, please give a 101 on what the Council of Governments is and what they do, especially given that we have several new elected officials in all of our jurisdictions. So I'm going to endeavor to do that somewhat quickly. The Council of Governments is quite a complex entity, so please excuse me as I give you a whole information overload to just try and paint that picture for you. So the Council of Governments, we were established by voluntary association of the local units of government in 1966. And the vision of the COG was to have a forum for improved communications, multi-jurisdictional decision-making, regional planning, and lead agency capacity for providing multi-jurisdictional programs. The services that are provided by the COG to our member jurisdictions are outlined in our interlocal agreement, and they can evolve based on the needs of the region. So currently the COG holds several designations on behalf of the region. We are the Regional Planning Commission. We are a conference or council of governments. We are the Regional Transportation Planning Organization, working with WSDOT. We are the Metropolitan Planning Organization, and because our overall population is above 250,000, we're also a transportation management area, which increases the planning obligations that we have on behalf of the region. That is in cooperation with the Federal Highway Administration and the Federal Transit Administration. And then we are an economic development district under the U.S. Department of Commerce, the Economic Development Administration. So, but what is a Council of Governments really? By RCW, we exist to study regional governmental problems of mutual interest and concern. We formulate recommendations for review and action by our member jurisdiction bodies. That's a wide open doorway to walk through as far as what can a council be. Councils of governments are very unique. They reflect the needs of their individual communities and in the respective region. So for example, our neighbors at Yakima, under their Council of Governments, they host a homelessness program. They are set up a new housing authority. The two of the councils of governments that I cooperated with when I was in Idaho, one hosted the Veterans Affairs programs and an area council on aging. Another was highly engaged in entrepreneurial lending and lending for municipalities. So they really can look like what the needs of the jurisdictions are. Our Council of Governments, because of our role as the MPO, has been predominantly focused on transportation planning. But what we want to do is introduce the idea to our members that we can be more than that if our jurisdictions feel like there's a shared opportunity for us there. So in a nutshell, we provide solutions for shared regional problems. We convene our local governments to collaboratively plan, fund, and administer solutions to shared community needs. So because all of that is complex and has a lot of moving parts, we've developed a graphic to kind of capture all that in one place. As the regional planning agency by RCW, our role there is to initiate regional planning programs, accept grants in aid, and funnel state and federal funding into our member jurisdictions in the interest of planning. So that encompasses our work as an MPO, our transportation planning work. That also encompasses what we do as the Economic Development District. And of course, the marriage of those two things, or the intersection, no transportation pun intended, is land use planning. So under our regional planning activities, you received in your packet a very thorough list of the kinds of plans and services that the COG currently provides. But a couple I thought were important to point out. One is our call for projects. This happens every 2 to 3 years. It's a funding allocation that we receive through WSDOT for local multimodal projects. So it's a competitive process. Our communities put forth projects. Our Transportation Advisory Council ranks those and determines which projects receive funding through that process. We do put together the Metropolitan Transportation Plan. That's a 20-year outlook on transportation planning that's updated every 5 years. What's important about the MTP is that transportation projects that are not listed in that plan are not eligible for state or federal transportation funding. So it's very important that we work cooperatively with our communities to make sure that your projects are listed in that 20-year plan. The Transportation Improvement Program, we provide assistance to work with our jurisdictions and make sure that all of those projects end up in WSDOT's project software. For the same reason, when projects are not entered, they are not eligible for funding. So we help provide support for that project. And then regional transportation priorities. We work to rank those collaborative transportation projects in our region. It's important to list these projects and rank them so that it's useful for local, state, or federal funding opportunities, not only those that come through federal highways and WSDOT, but perhaps other funding sources that our jurisdictions might be seeking to fund those transportation projects. Under the Work for the Growth Management Act, your comprehensive plan, we do certify the transportation elements for those programs as well. And we do travel demand modeling, providing data and land use scenarios. This becomes very important for the staff when they're working on their comprehensive planning. We also have private requests from businesses looking to expand, wanting to have information about that travel demand data and other information that we provide. We can provide additional services upon request. I will fully admit that not all jurisdictions will ask for this, so we want to make sure that there's some awareness that we can do land use planning, land use land suitability analysis, mapping services, and provide some equity data support. That one in particular, state and federal programs are requiring a higher threshold of analysis of equity in spending and grant funding. So this might be an area where there's a higher demand for data than there used to be. So local government resources, this is what we call our economic development work. Under the EDA, we receive funding to produce a comprehensive economic development strategy, or CEDS. The CEDS is produced, it's fully updated every 5 years and given an update annually. This is the backbone document that the Economic Development Administration uses in determining economic impact as they're considering granting funds for local projects or infrastructure. So since 2009, $12.5 million has been invested in the Benton Franklin region through EDA grants. We do operate multiple regional revolving loan funds. Currently, we have roughly $1 million available for lending. This program has been underneath the COG since the late 80s. We've given $16.4 million in small business loans to 177 small businesses. We do provide funding technical assistance to our local jurisdictions to help with the flow of state and federal funding into our communities. So you may have been invited to participate in bi-monthly sit-downs with the federal delegation staff to talk about projects, or invited to an educational program where we have speakers from the EDA or the USDA Rural Development talking about funding programs and education. Currently, EDA has $3.5 billion available nationally for community building programs. And under the Infrastructure and Investment Jobs Act, there is significant funding available for transportation programs. Currently, the COG is serving as the notice of record source for Senator Murray and Senator Cantwell's offices for disseminating information on federal notices of funding. We do have the ability to be a lead agency, applying for grant funding either as the COG on behalf of our jurisdictions for a program, or on behalf of one or more jurisdictions themselves, providing that grant administration service. So one such program that we did in 2021, we received $600,000 through a competitive grant under the EPA for brownfields assessments. So that has made available funds for site-specific or area-wide planning and assessment, phase 1, phase 2, environmental assessment of properties located in Benton or Franklin counties that can be revitalized for redevelopment. So funding sources, this is always a question for us. You can see that our 2021 budget, our operating budget was $1.287 million. Of that, 80% comes from state or federal funding programs and less than 20% comes from local funds. So those annual dues assessments that come from our members. We have consistent or renewing program funding, that's our state and federal programs, single opportunity grants, which we mentioned, contracted services, and then local funds. Under our renewing or consistent program funding, we do have the federal transportation funding, and that requires a 13.5% local match. So that's where some of those annual funds come back in to offset those programs for us. Our state rural transportation funding program through WashDOT does not have any matching requirements. Our Economic Development Administration program is 100% match. It's a 3-year, $225,000 program, so $75,000 a year goes to match that program. Single Opportunity Awards, we talked about the Brownfields program. We also had a direct fund come into us in 2020 through the CARES Act for COVID relief funding, and that allowed us to hire an economic recovery coordinator that's been working with us for the last 18 months to provide economic resiliency and technical assistance to our jurisdictions. The funding for this program does run out in June of this year. We have made a request to both Benton and Franklin counties for Arpa funding to continue that position under the COG through 2024. So we're still waiting to hear on that, so fingers crossed. We do provide some contracted services to the Benton County Public Facilities District and the Tri-Cities Regional Public Facilities District. This program is a nominal net revenue generator and more of a service to the PFDs than something that generates a significant revenue for the COG. So, and last but not least is our local funds. As part of that interlocal agreement with our member jurisdictions, you all agreed to fund the operations of the COG. Local funds are required to balance our operating budget after all other forms of funding have been applied. So for 2022, that budget across all 17 of our member jurisdictions is $260,774. As of right now, that is the amount that's required to meet our matching obligations, and that's it. So an important note about local funds is that BFCOG in recent years, I can't tell you how far back, has limited its requests for those local funds to what's been required for those federal matching dollars and nothing more. Because of that, the COG has operated on a limited operational staff and have subsidized overhead expenses when necessary out of the reserve funds for the COG, which frankly have now been nearly depleted. The only source we have for generating unrestricted funds besides our overhead on our federal and state programs is those local funds. So that will be a conversation that the COG will have to have with you all as our member jurisdictions as we really look at what are the services that you would like the COG to provide for you and what will it really take from a capacity standpoint to do that consistently and with good quality. So before I jump to questions, I do want to point out one item that was in your packet, and that was support of summary, because I do think that this is really important. So since 2017, the city of Pasco has received $7.1 million in transportation project funding, so direct funding as a pass-through from the COG, and has included intersection improvements for Columbia, oh, whoops, that's not you. I was going to say Columbia Center in Deschutes is not your project. But additionally, the return on investment has been $56 for every dollar invested in the COG over the last 5 years. So important to note that a lot of the work that the COG does not generate direct revenue back to you as jurisdictions. It's more of a service. But we do want to point out that there is some inherent cash value back to the COG. So thank you. Any questions?
Any questions from our council members? Councilman Campos and then Mayor Pro Tem Maloney.
Thanks, Michelle, for that presentation. As I'm learning about all this stuff as an appointed official, took over for Ruben Alvarado, who's hot and heavy and all this stuff, and he's did a really good job. My question for you, as in the BFCOG, Pasco's been working on their transportational master plan, and is that something that you could have facilitated or taken on or even added a support role? Is that what I'm understanding from your presentation?
So we can provide supportive data and help consult with staff. Our purview is really that larger regional picture of transportation. So that doesn't necessarily take the place of what happens with each individual jurisdiction.
Perfect. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have another question? Thank you.
Right. Well, thank you, Michelle, and thank you. I do want to point out that the regional PFD certainly isn't a much of a revenue generator for you, and in fact, I know we may be behind, not just Pasco, but the entire regional PFD members may be behind in our bills. So certainly, I know that staff is aware of this and will be working to rectify that. But I will say that just the support you provided over the last year, just keeping the organization meeting its charter, meeting its obligations is wonderful, and you've done, I think, a bang-up job of just dusting off the paperwork, finding what documents did exist, and being able to get us back rolling in compliance. So thank you very much for that. So I've got a pair of questions here. First, regarding transportation funding and the work that the legislature did to pass the transportation package. And so we saw a real strong need for a coordinated regional response. I spent about 6 hours listening to public testimony to provide, I think, a net of 3 minutes of my own testimony on behalf of the city. And what I saw from a lot of the other jurisdictions is that they had great coordinated responses where they had priority because they came in as a group, so they got all together, were able to speak as one voice and be able to play off each other. And that just created that really complementary benefit there. So as a regional transportation planning organization, what role can the COG play in coordinating that response as a region? Again, Pasco testified. I didn't hear Kennewick, didn't hear Richland, didn't hear West Richland, didn't hear either county. I mean, our response was, as a region, was paltry, frankly. What role can the COG have in coordinating that response?
So very honestly, I feel like because I was new to how some of those processes work for the Washington legislature, I know that I could have done a better job of being in front of what would that look like for the COG, but having come in, that wasn't a stand that the COG had taken previously. Related to the funding package in its entirety, one of the challenges that we have is that, of course, we have 17 member jurisdictions, and the impacts to them based on the kinds of entities they are were different. So, for example, the counties and the Association of Counties came out very strongly against the transportation funding package, while the cities may have had different opinions about elements of the package as a whole. Do I believe that the COG could have done a better job of at least responding to the fact that there was not a single regional project included in the funding plan from that level without weighing in on the bigger elements of the overall funding package? Yes, I think we could have done that. So I think that's a fair assessment. But I think at the same time, that has not been what the COG has historically done. So if that is the expectation of us as jurisdictions for the COG, then yes, we need to have that conversation about being the direct voice of the region.
Great, no, I appreciate that, and I certainly wasn't meaning to cast stones at what happened this year by any stretch of the imagination, but rather use that as an exemplify an area where we as a region have been lacking. And from your presentation, sounds like you have a strong nexus, certainly in transportation, if not some other areas. To your point, I don't think I can emphasize enough that there was not a single project for their entire region in the transportation package.
Not one.
And I can't emphasize enough how disappointing with a scale of package that they were proposing that almost nothing in Eastern Washington at all, and what was I think virtually entirely located within Spokane. I think that just really that was a really disappointing and frustrating event, and I wish we could have spoken with a louder voice against that. And as it was, I was asked a number of questions that led me in that direction. Was able to share certainly my frustration from the city of Pasco's perspective and our lack of projects. But I would have loved to have our neighboring cities and counties and other organizations weighing in with the same voice. So certainly, if that's something that is legal and within the things that you can do, I know certain agencies cannot advocate for, so I wasn't sure if that fits there. But I'd be interested in if there's something we can do there. I'd be interested in seeing if there is a role for the future.
One point I would add to that as well, and this kind of goes back to that local funding and capacity question, is that especially during the legislative session when things are moving hot and heavy and those bills are changing rapidly, I can say with total certainty that the COG currently, from a staffing standpoint, we don't have the staff to track it, let alone to stay ahead of it and understand when to insert ourselves and say, okay, there's not anything for our projects here, what can we do? So that would be something to keep in mind as we talk about funding and capacity in the future.
Great, excellent point. The other question I had, changing gears pretty dramatically. So you talked a lot about ways of getting state and federal funding, and again, like the conversation, I guess related to the conversation we were just having, we like funding. We like other agencies, you know, especially the state and the federal government helping pay for what we need here for local. What gaps or areas of improvement do you see in the partnership between BFCOG and the city of Pasco? Are there some opportunities where the money's there, but maybe we didn't know to ask for it? Can you speak at all to that? Where
Sure.
what can we do better to work with you?
Well, what I will say is that the relationship that the BFCOG staff has with the staff of the city of Pasco is a very high quality, high functioning relationship. I can honestly say when I walked in here this evening that the majority of your staff are folks that I've had the opportunity to interact with in my first year, and know that my staff are doing the same. And so you do have a very engaged, involved, and proactively thinking team here at the city. I would say that where the bigger opportunity lies, again, goes back to that capacity question with the COG. So, for example, we have stepped up in a big way in this last year as we've had so much federal funding opportunities coming down through Arpa, through the new Jobs Act, all of those things. But honestly, for every jurisdiction and the COG, it has been all that we can do to just keep the information flowing, let alone have the ability to really dissect it, look at it, take the knowledge that we have of what's happening with programming in the region, coordinate individually with the staffs at the jurisdictions and say, we think this is an opportunity for you because. And we've been getting that feedback from some of the jurisdictions as well, saying, oh my gosh, we've just been drowning in the NOFOs, let alone understanding what we should go for and what's competitive, what's not competitive, what might be a really viable project. But again, so it's that research and development, perhaps the grant writing support. Now, if we as a region wanted to come together and say, hey, we feel like that flow of funding is an important role for the COG, and we should all join in together to invest in having the staff to do that on behalf of all of the jurisdictions rather than each jurisdiction hiring staff to do that or missing opportunities, that would be a valuable conversation to have.
Great. I really appreciate your answers to my questions, and good job staying exactly on point for your, I understand, coming ask for, as to understand, you know, what more can the local jurisdictions do to help fund and get money out of these programs that exist that maybe opportunities that we're missing. Back to that, what was it, $56 per dollar invested? Is that what you stated?
Yes.
All right, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Any further questions from our council members? Seeing none. Michelle, it was great to meet you and have coffee with you. Thank you for the updates.
Thank you.
And we do look forward to a more involved partnership with you.
Perfect. Thank
Thank
you very
again,
much.
Michelle. All right, and with that, we move on to item C on our agenda, Technical Rescue Program, Chief Gear.
Madam Mayor and Council, thank you. Just kind of a brief introduction of it. You know, Pasco Fire is what we call in the industry a truly an all-hazards fire department. In addition to responding to fires, as Council knows, we also provide the airport fire protection. We respond to many emergency medical calls at the ALS paramedic level. We respond to hazardous materials incidents. And we also have a very progressive and well-organized and staffed technical rescue program. And tonight, we're gonna have Deputy Chief Pat Reed, who's in charge of operations, and Battalion Chief Don Donis, who is a technical rescue program lead, just kind of take us through what is technical rescue in the Pasco Fire Department and in the city of Pasco. So thank you.
Thank you, Chief.
Council, thank you. Mayor Pro Tem, thanks for having us tonight. So Chief Gear gave us a real good introduction on this, and the key is that we are no longer, when him and I and even Chief Donis came in, just the fire department. We're multitask, responsibility organization, and tech rescue being one of them. Tech rescue is the use of specialized tools is basically what it is. And the reason we do this is not only because of the types of industry we have in the community, but the people we have visiting our community as well. We deal with vehicle and machinery, confined space, rope, trench rescue, structural collapse, water and ice rescue. We have 3 teams, and we have a land rescue team, a water rescue team, and a vehicle machinery team. Each one of those are a specialized team. The vehicle machinery team gets involved with a lot of our agricultural industry and our major industry from some of the incidents we have, such as people trapped in machinery inside the processing plants, or as simple as somebody being trapped underneath a tractor. Additionally, because of the interstates and roadways we have going through here, we have a lot of vehicles and heavy vehicles coming through, and they deal with that. I'll let Chief Donis talk a little bit about our water and land rescue teams from that perspective.
As of today, they just, the water rescue team just was training on a new boat that we got a grant from the Ecology for Spill Protection. So today and tomorrow they'll be training on that, getting that in service, and that was all, pretty much all grant money that funded that second boat. I've been involved with the land-based technical rescue team probably for the last 20 years, and they've done a great job on a lot of incidents that we've had. The soil we have around here, everybody knows, is pretty much sandy, and it has a lot of the construction that we have where they dig the trenches, those trenches can collapse in on people, and we have incidents. These are really low frequency, high risk situations. You know, our second nature is to jump back into that trench and try to get that person out. We're trained not to do that because then it just compounds the problem and we have more people to rescue, and we don't want to rescue ourselves. So the teams have come a long ways, and all this stuff's in your packet. You can take a look at it. Rope rescue's probably the most common technician level on all the rescue parts. We use it a lot at Palouse Falls. Palouse Falls is approximately an hour and 15 minutes, an hour and 20 minutes away. We are probably the closest and most technical rescue team to help people there. So it takes a big effort, a lot of people to get headed out that way. And to be honest with you, there's very little communication down once you're over the edge, and we don't get very good information. So these guys are very highly trained, and they have to think on the spot when they get there of what exactly rigging and how they're going to get people off the ledges and out of the situations they've got themselves in.
So a little bit about the technical rescue. It's above and beyond the standard training we send our firefighters through. On average, they have anywhere just from additional training from operational level to 32 hours. When we get into the technical rescue or the technician level, there's an additional 40 plus hours. Plus we maintain monthly training requirements for each and every one of those teams. Like Chief Donis was saying, the team was training, the water rescue team was training today and tomorrow. So that's 8+ hours that each one of those individuals will get every month on top of their emergency medical training, their firefighting training, their basic level of training that the city requires us to do as well. So it is a huge commitment, not only by the fire department, but those firefighters and fire officers that are taking on this task to help the residents of the community.
And just everybody knows the last couple of years have been real difficult to get groups together. It's really important that these teams train together because they have to rely on each other. So we had to get creative to get some of the training for them to train together. And now that things are opening back up, the teams are getting a little bit, I don't want to say better attitude, but they're getting a little bit more excited about what they're doing again because they're able to train with the whole group. So these are just some of the pictures of the trainings that we've done. Fortunately, we've got a lot of the businesses. Some of the businesses have their own teams with limited abilities. And so they're welcoming us to go out and train in their facilities. It's a help for us and it's a help for them. Them to see our capabilities and us to be able to go into the facility. And so when we have to go in there, it's not the first time we go in there. We're pretty familiar with it. And it's really a good training for both parties. Their teams, like I said, understand where we're training and we can work together as teams.
The one thing to keep in mind too is no technical rescue is the same. The concepts we apply are the same, but no technical rescue is the same. And these firefighters and fire officers have to think through some of these. And it's understanding mechanics, understanding hazardous materials, it's understanding the bodies of the people as well. So it's, like I said, it is a very diversified type of training and rescue that they perform.
And here's Palouse Falls, just them doing some training. You can see a rescue dummy they're using over the fence here. The picture I don't think does that justice. I think they're 30 or 40 feet hanging on that rope. It's hard work. It's very labor intensive. And as you know, the extreme weather conditions we can have, it could be 3 degrees one day and 130 the next day, it seems like. And there's no quitting these guys. They've been out there at Palouse Falls after dark, pulling people off of the edges where they got trapped. And they work hard when they get the call to do their duty.
Another area we spend a lot of time for high angle rescues are bridges. With some of the issues we deal with mental health issues and stuff like that, we do spend a lot of time and we do train on the bridges as well from a perspective, not only water rescue, but from the high angle rescue perspective as well.
We had a pretty dramatic rescue a couple years ago on the Cable Bridge with the police officers. We give each other a hard time when we're out there on the streets, but when it comes time, we work really well together, and I was really happy about how that incident happened. I do have a video of it if anybody wants to see it, if you haven't seen it in the last few years at the awards dinner. So here's some of the trench rescue stuff. It's very complicated. The one picture on the right there, you can see, we try to push the teams to think outside the box. That's actually a car that we put down inside the trench and then put a dummy inside that and made them really think of how they would happen to do that. It's a highly unlikely thing, but these are the type of things that we run into and have to think through the process. So you see smiles on their faces. They're having a good time. They do like to train. And this is, go ahead.
This is a structural collapse, which there's various kinds. You'll see on the far left one, that would be similar to any residents in our community that they're doing renovation to, and just by making one simple mistake of cutting the wrong floor joist or the wrong roof rafter makes the building rack and come down, and we have to assure that as well. We have the industrial side, which we recently just had out in our community with the building falling down because of wind driven and stuff like that. So these are some of the various issues we run across. It's very common to find issues with the structures in this perspective. A lot of times when you see these type of incidents, it's because of unexpected wind events, in some cases not following our building codes for the structural collapse and renovations from that perspective.
So basically the water rescue team, it's trained to mitigate emergencies that occur in the water, swift water, Columbia River, open waters. We have the Snake and the Yakima rivers that Occasionally we have issues with, you know, the warmer weather, people out there getting themselves in trouble for one reason or another. Summertime is a fun time to be out on the water, and sometimes people are not as safe or think it won't happen to them. Water rescue in any incident that involves the removal of victims from any body of water other than a swimming pool. We have our share of those too, and it helps to have the water rescue trained people that are on duty. They are always carrying their bags with them, whether they're on the fire truck or on the ambulance. We've got a variety of different trained specialists. Responses also include ice. We don't think of ice around here too much, but we still do have the ponds and the marinas that do get iced over occasionally. I can remember a couple winters ago, we did have a few kayakers that got stranded. There was 20 or 30 feet of ice on the shoreline, and they could not get out of the water and had to call us out. So it's just a variety of different things that happen. Boaters get stranded with the winds blowing, that type of thing. Oops. And that kind of leads into here. This is probably, you're not going to see a whole lot of smiles on their faces, because this is not the fun type of training they like to do. They are in dry suits, but it still is pretty cold. Your face and exposed parts do get cold, and they kind of look like the Stay Puft Marshmallow Man that it's hard to maneuver. So.
And this is, ice rescue is one of the least incidents we come across, but when it does happen, it's one of the longest and most work intensive because of some of the issues we encounter. Most people think they can walk across the ice, they walk across, they fall through. And as we go out to get them, the ice is breaking up, which means now we become into a water incident as well. So from that perspective, it's very low frequency, but we train highly on it any opportunity we get.
And here's the boat team. Like I said, this is the original boat. Chief Gear went out and found that this community really did not have a boat rescue team. So he kind of decided that Pasco was going to be the first team to put this together, and tried working together with the other cities. And for one reason or another, we just put our own program up, and it's been pretty successful. These are the guys that are out there training, and for the most part, they have smiles on their faces. Technical rescue team, vehicle machinery, we kind of talked about it, industrial machines, farm equipment, heavy equipment. This is probably our second frequent call compared to going out to Palouse Falls and the TRT team. This is also extrications with heavy trucks, buses, vehicles, that type of thing. And there's always new techniques. It's like any industry out there. There's always newer, better ways to do things. Obviously, cars are being built differently now. A lot of electrical cars on the roads that pushes our teams of making sure that they're extricating the people the right way without getting ourselves hurt at the same time.
The other thing we encounter are odd metals, beryllium, titanium, and so on like that. When I came in and Chief Gear came into the fire service, the jaws of life were these huge things. Today they've changed. They're lighter, battery operated, but they have more capability than what they did 30 and 35 years ago. And with that, our folks have to train on those tools in conjunction with something as simple as a handsaw, a hacksaw, a screwdriver, a pair of pliers, because all that factors in both the vehicle extrication and into the machinery and industrial portions of this type of rescue.
And we're very fortunate that the city of Pasco has some wrecking yards, and they are very generous. I believe right now we've got 2 school buses that we're able to cut on and do a little bit of hands-on and figure out the best way to get people out if something tragically did happen like that. So they do help us a lot by giving us hands-on stuff to do. And here's some pictures of probably last year them messing around with the bus. And this is just a vehicle accident. You'd be amazed of, you know, you can see everybody on the freeway, you go by the accident, it's just a normal accident. And then you come up on something that you don't even recognize as a car. Those are the real tough, difficult ones to try to figure out of how to help the people that need it. Farm, industrial, those are our technical rescue teams. There's a lot of procedures that we have to go through. Like I said, it's like a trench rescue. You want to jump in and help that person. With the industrial plants we have out here, processing plants we have, unfortunately, we do have our fair share of incidents where somebody does have a hand or a part stuck in the machine. And that's where we have to come up on it and slow down, make sure the machine's off. There's a lot of procedures that we have to do. Confined space, we have to make sure that the air is breathable for our guys to go down in, or we run into the same problem of having more problems.
One of the things on all these rescue teams, we are very, very governed by L&I, Labor and Industries. Recently, we had an issue come up with them, and we went through the compliance investigation, and we came out with flying colors to the point they've asked us to teach them on some of these issues. So it's kudos to the folks that we have on these teams and their capabilities and their ability to comply with the regulations and laws.
Yeah, and like Chief Reed said, there's no one incident that's the same. They have to go out there and think on their a moment's notice and figure out the problem and do it safely, so we are not getting hurt and we're not hurting the people any farther than they already are.
With that being said, council members, any questions for us?
Councilman Gunfels, go ahead.
I was hoping you guys were going to be here last week, Chief Gary. I don't know if my comments got passed on to you, but I was on a ride along Station 83 last weekend. I got to hang out with you guys from 10 o'clock in the morning. I had supper with the guys at 6 p.m. I saw a lot. They put me in turnouts. I got to run the hose, not at full pressure. They only ran it at 100. I think they had direction not to give me the full sauce. So really admire everything you guys do. I think when I grew up, maybe I want to be a firefighter. I don't know if I cut out for the police service yet. But no, you guys do a great job. And again, just said it last week, but I want to take the time since staff's here. Your ride along, or your station tour is probably pretty cool. I got to see some things. I talked with Andre Roybal. He showed me some of your guys' tech. Sounds like you guys are leading the industry, not just in some of your technical stuff, but you guys have gear that other stations don't have. And I think that speaks to how well you work with police. You've got tactical gear and bags that you can go in behind, guys when you're making an entry. I was there that weekend when you guys responded to the guy on the bridge. I didn't get to go there. I was doing something else. But Andre did invite me back to go out with you guys on TRT, and I'm thinking boat race weekend is probably the right weekend for me to go out.
Yes, sir.
Well, I would just like to say that we couldn't do it without you guys' support, financially, and just the support that you guys give us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Councilwoman Torres.
Thank you. Thank you for the presentation and everything that you do. And yes, you sound like you had more of an exciting day of 911 calls, and I didn't. They were very thankful that I was there because they said that I probably brought the easy spell that day. So I don't know what that meant, but but I did have a question for you in regards to the technical rescue. Columbia Basin Dive Rescue, when do they come into play if you are on scene typically first, I take it?
So anytime we go out on a water rescue, they're automatically dispatched with us. They're part of the support because we take care of the surface. They take care of below surface for us in that perspective. So when you see our boat, or you even see the sheriff's boats out and it's for any type of water incident, Columbia Basin Dive Rescue is being dispatched with us as a support mechanism. We support them on top of the water. They support us for below the water.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Councilman Milne.
Yes, with the whole thing with the COVID and as far as different industries losing employees or not being able to recruit, have you guys had any problem as far as being able to recruit, and then also with the training, being able to have the people there you know, say if people went out with COVID or what, can you kind of just give me a quick synopsis on that?
I'd say the training, like I said, we had to get a little creative. The chiefs and, you know, everybody was trying to get together and keep our training up to par, but also follow the mandates where we couldn't get together. So we limited the training and did it the best we could with the station crews. And that's, like I said, the crews are really happy now that they can all get together and do these trainings, like the boat training. I'm sure there was, you know, 10 or 15 people out there today, and tomorrow the same thing. So it was creative, but also understanding that we had to keep our training up. This is something that in our job we always have to figure out a solution, and I applaud the chiefs for letting us get together and keep doing the training and staying safe at a minimum number.
I'll speak to the recruiting a little bit. Really, it's very interesting. You know, there was times when we'd hire new entries and we'd have hundreds and hundreds of applicants, and we're just not seeing that. Even, you know, police has had trouble recruiting, but even fire, EMS, many of the EMS systems across the country have had to go from paramedic level down to EMT level because they just can't get people. So there is a shortage even in the fire service of people willing to, coming through COVID, willing to take that on. And we saw it in our last recruiting. I think we only had one paramedic applicant in our last recruiting, where normally we'd have 5, 10 paramedic applications at least. It's just the numbers are down.
Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate the explanation.
No further comments. Well, this message goes out to the community. If you wish to be involved in the police or the fire department, please reach out to our departments. Chief Gear, this is a comment just for you. What was it, maybe 3 years ago, Ben Shear took me out to the A Street Training Center. You guys were out there putting fires. I think I'm due for another training.
Okay, well, we can make that happen, believe me. It's that training. It's that training time of the year now that the weather's a little better.
Yes, thank you again. Thank you for your presentation and for all your work out there, and stay safe.
Thank you, Council.
Okay, and with that, we move on to item D on our agenda, Public Records Request Update, Director Ratkai.
Yes, thank you. And because it's a public records request update, our city clerk, Debbie Barham, will be making a presentation this evening.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ratkai, and good evening, Council. Thank you for this opportunity to update you on the city's public records request and provide you with highlights from the required state reporting from the years 2018 to 2020. So if you switch slides, thank you. So in 2017, the Washington State Legislature directed state and local agencies, such as the City of Pasco, that met or exceeded a $100,000 threshold in costs in processing public records requests to report annually. And that was to include public records retention, records management, public records disclosure information. And out of that, the Joint Legislative Audit and Review Committee was created, also known as Jaylark. And that was to provide us with guidance for following the reporting requirements for the public records data. So the next slide, please. So prior to 2017 and the Washington State mandate, the city clerk's office utilized an access database, a series of electronic folders and emails to track and process public records requests. So when the first Jaylark report was due for 2017, that was done, submitted in June of 2018. And let me tell you, it was a labor-intensive manual process to gather all the data that we had available. And as a result, the City of Pasco completed that Jaylark report as a jurisdiction reporting under $100,000, because remember, at that time, there was really no tracking mechanism set up to gather all the full cost of what we were doing with public records requests. So in mid-2019, Next Request, a public records software, was implemented. And this software is to help with the processing of, to assist staff in managing public records requests, meet new reporting requirements that were required, and offer a one-step online service to the public. Also in 2019, the city created a new deputy city clerk position and hired a new clerk and deputy city clerk in late 2019. So you'll see the benefits that have been reaped for the additional staff in the city clerk's office, especially the deputy city clerk, whose primary focus is on processing public records requests. Next slide, please. So now the highlights from the years 2018 to 2020 Jaylark reports. So in this one, you can see, I'd like you to focus in on BD3 and BD4, which is the total number of public records requests received and closed. You can see that they, in the 3 years, they have over doubled the number of requests that we get on an annual basis, and we do foresee that trend increasing. So our next slide shows that we are getting better at tracking the city and legal staff time spent on processing public records requests, especially with the addition of the deputy city clerk and the next request software to enter, retain, and report on those costs. So it may look like we're spending more, but I think we're tracking it more accurately. So the city clerk's office has focused on educating staff across the board on records management, and that education starts when the employee is hired. The deputy city clerk has focused on building relationships with department staff, as well as additional training when processing requests to ensure that the department staff includes their time spent in retrieving, searching for, and uploading responsive records to a request, as well as documenting where they search for those requests and who searched for those records. This is an important written history where and who searched for records for each request, because it's vital to document this, what the city staff did to ensure that the due diligence in searching for records to that request was met. So next slide. So in having that deputy city clerk focused on processing public records, interacting with and training department staff, and communicating with requesters, the number of requests closed within a 5-day period has increased 5-fold. So 2018, we had 71 records that were closed within 5 days, and in 2020, that was 356 records that were closed within 5 days, requests, excuse me. And then as far as the average number of days to final disposition, you can see that the requests have reduced significantly on the average closing time from 15.1 days to 7.1 days. So that, I feel, is very good news. Next slide, please. There we go. So this slide is interesting because it depicts on who the requesters are. So Jaylark asks for us to at least offer a request to say, who are you? And so you can see that the majority of the requesters are individuals, and then the next highest are organizations, and those really represent private businesses that are looking for records mainly to deal with land use issues, or it could be even like when the public bids come in, they want to know who did the bid and got all that information. So now on our next slide, you can see the number of requests closed with no responsive records has increased also. And this is due to a variety of reasons. The main one, or one of the main ones, is that people assume that we hold all the records, and we don't. And those would be records that other agencies hold, such as death certificate, birth certificates, marriage licenses, and such. And then another case is that the records they're asking for don't exist. And and we have no duty to create a record for them. Another instance could be that there's no records based on the search criteria that the requester has done. We'll reach out to that requester, ask for clarification, and even after that clarification has been made, there's still no responsive records. And then lastly, it's those records that we may have had, but they've been dispositioned based on the Washington State Archives retention schedules. So Also, due to the implementation of the public records request software, you can see that there's a significant increase in providing responsive records electronically. And this is really a great benefit, I think, for everyone. It benefits the requesters because they can start their public records request in this software. We can manage it more efficiently, get it out to the departments to get the records back. And in many cases, there's no cost to the requester by receiving those back into electronically. So, well, here's the good news, I feel. Due to the updated procedures, additional staffing, ongoing training of staff, the implementation of the software, the city has had no claims or litigation related to public records requests since we started tracking these metrics for Jaylark, and we plan on keeping it that way. So if you also may be asking about the estimated costs incurred for managing and retaining records, and you can see in that little tiny red text how we arrived at those numbers, and I'll go ahead and tell them to you because you can't see them very well. So the first one has to do with agency staff costs. So we base the agency staff costs on the salaries and benefits for the assigned staff that respond to public records, and then we base it on the percentage on their time spent, and that's why we need to retain that piece. The next one, I also want to mention that in that we do not include the city attorney's costs for reviewing public records. So the next one is the cost for the systems to manage and retain records, and this is just records for the city overall. And that's twofold. That's the CI management storage, where we retain a large number of our records, as well as they'll come out and do our destruction for us when the time comes ready to dispose of those records. And then the last one is services purchased for managing and retaining records, and that's where we place our next request, our public records software. So you can see in 2019 when it was implemented, that cost is going to stay consistent about that amount of money. But overall, you can see that in 2020, we have spent about $207,000 in public records requests based on the Jaylark requirements. So my final comments have to do with, one item has to do with early in the COVID-19 pandemic, a state proclamation was issued waiving that 5-day acknowledgement requirement for public records requests. However, I'm pleased to tell you that staff, led by the Deputy City Clerk, still met that requirement and fulfilled requests in a timely and efficient manner throughout the pandemic. The next Jaylark report due for the 2021 public records requests will be due in June of 2022. And it'll be interesting to see the changes that were made from 2020 to 2021. And we also want to add a piece to that. We'd like to start making some comparisons with statistics from other cities that are of similar size within Washington State. And so when that comes out, we'll be happy to share that information with you. So the City Clerk's office continues to refine its public records process and reporting, and it continues to work on providing quality training for staff, and most importantly is to provide excellent customer service to the public records requesters. So thank you again for this opportunity.
Thank you so much for your presentation. I appreciate that information. It's always great to hear that we're saving money in public records requests. Any questions or comments from our council? Seeing none, we moved on to item E on the agenda, ordinance amending PMC Title III related to miscellaneous late fees.
Thank you, Madam Mayor and Council. I would like to introduce our finance manager, Darcy Buckley. She's been in her position for the last year and a half. However, today you finally get to see her face. And the presentation is regarding our request to revise late fees for miscellaneous billing. Thank you.
Can you hear me? Oh, good. I can hear me. Good evening, Council and Mayor and council members, I'm glad to present this little bit of information to you. Of the services of the city of, provided by the city, much of the billing occurs in a routine and specialized software service. And you're probably familiar with them. There are things like utility billing or bills for ambulance transport, or when we have a local improvement district, we have a system to bill those out. And those are all routine, uniform rate sorts of services. But there are services that the city provides that are outside of those specialized software packages, and those items that we bill are done through our New World ERP, which is just our financial package. And we call it miscellaneous billing because it catches a lot of different things like leases and other contracts, grant reimbursements, cemetery bills, engineering services, and any interlocal type of contracts that we have and agreements. These things are often non-routine and often one-time instances or unique in some way. And for instance, in 2021, using that module, we created 1,820 bills, and the total revenue was $31 million. And it's a big number. But when you remove the interlocal type of billing and the capital reimbursement, which are loans and grants, then it's only about $7.5 million. What this agenda report serves to do is to simplify the late fee structure that's currently in place in the municipal code. It has many different late fees, and we want to make there only be one and to minimize that as much as possible. The goal always is to have a bill that people can easily pay and understand. And so by simplifying that, we're hopeful that it will help our customers and also save time for city staff. And so right now, of the billing that happened in 2021, for accounts that are 91 or greater days past due from the original bill, there's only about $32,000 that's delinquent. And so it doesn't happen frequently, and we always offer the ability to have a payment arrangement, which is our first choice to help people. But in the case where we can't, we have set up a new structure where we would send a notice and charge a $10 fee, trying to recuperate a little bit of the staff cost and also encourage prompt payment. We'd much rather have people pay us instead of have it go to a collection. So we're trying to kind of meet the needs of the citizens and also encourage prompt payment and help as much as possible. And just one of the things that I did wish to point out is of those $31,000 that are past due, there are things that are routine, are like water and sewer billings that are outside of a regular bill, and engineering services that we've provided. And so we want to try to be fair across the different billing programs to expect somewhat of the same timeliness, so that we don't treat one class of customers that are billed one way different than another class of customers. So let's see, is there any other important information? Not much else. That's the highlights. We unfortunately sometimes do have to produce a duplicate bill, and so this is our hope is if we make this small change, it's the least onerous on our customers and staff. So thank you for your time, and if you have any questions, I'd be glad to try to answer them.
Questions from Mayor Pro Tem Maloney.
Thank you, and thank you for for looking into this. Sometimes there's these legacy holdovers that just make your life harder. It also makes customers' lives harder, which is really paramount. But it sounds like this is really just to simplify this all, so we're on one page across the board which makes everything routine and not one-offs every single time you go where you have to go check which categories it fall into. So this looks pretty common sense to me, and I'm very supportive of it. Thank you.
Good. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further questions or comments from our council? Looks like there's none. Thank you
Okay,
again
thank
for
you very
excellent
much.
presentation.
Thank you for your time.
And so moving on to item F on our agenda, American Rescue Plan Act, projects list and staff recommendations. And we have Ms. Angela Pashon.
So just a
Manager?
couple comments to kick it off. I did want to just make a comment on our last item that certainly COVID and all we've had to do to respond to it over the last couple of years throughout the beginning and throughout it was really kind of nice just to listen to a presentation on how we can just make things more simple and provide better service to our customers. We haven't been able to have much of those kind of comments in a while, or presentations in a while, so appreciate finance directors and her staff's efforts at some reforms, internal reforms. Anyway, as council is aware, staff or city council, the city was awarded $17.4 million through the American Rescue Plan Act, ARPA. And I have no news to this council. You immediately put that money to use. You provided a number of different projects and initiatives, the business assistance program, which you got a report on just the other week, and utility assistance, community resource specialist, the vaccination clinics and testing clinics, and our water infrastructure projects that council recently authorized. And so these projects combined were about $12.6 million. So, you know, this is spent to date plus projected over the next few years, and leaving about $4.75 million allocation for council to consider for further programming. Mayor, as you announced, Senior Management Analyst Angela Pashon will update us on the status of those approved programs and then review several other programs that council has talked about as we've kind of worked our way through the list of programs and initiatives. They haven't necessarily been allocated, but council's talked about them. There are some recommendations. Recommendations add up to more than what you have left. And reason being is because I think the recommendations are based on being able to actually pull off the program, not splitting it up, spreading the peanut butter too thin. So some of those programs may be something you may want to do, you may prioritize one or the other, or we may look to other funding besides the ARPA funding. So with that, Ms. Pashon, thank you.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. So as City Managers Zabel went through, these are the projects that have been approved. As Richa or Director Sigdell did a presentation on the, oh, this is a lot closer. I feel like they changed mics since the last time I was up here. So one of the approved projects is a community resource specialist, and I think many of you have been able to meet Gina on our staff, and she's been a great asset to our team as she's reaching out and researching all the different funding sources that are out there. So I did just want to touch base on that. She's doing a great job and also helping us connect with our community partners in a more engaging way. We have the community vaccination clinics through the Tri-City Hispanic Chamber of Commerce, and then as City Manager Zabel discussed the infrastructure projects. So the reason we're here tonight, so pending projects, these projects have been either on your list for about a year or so, or there are a couple that we would like to also provide tonight. So the Martin Luther King Center construction, we were successful in receiving $1 million for state appropriations through the legislature last year. So the request here, or the recommendation, would be $2.5 million with, we're estimating a total project cost of $6.5 million for that quality of life project. And then business improvement phase 1. So this is a new kind of subset, and this would be for outdoor seating. Staff envisions this being support in the requirements that are needed for outdoor seating. So it would be fencing, furniture, and being able to provide that to support the outdoor dining experience. Business Improvement Phase 2. This was the previously named Life Safety, so that is pending Treasury guidance. So I'm going to skip over that one. And then Regional Mental Health, there are several initiatives going on, and obviously Benton and Franklin counties implementing the mental health sales tax recently. There's a lot of discussions happening and a lot unknown, but the city does know that there will be some kind of buy-in to the programs. And one of those programs that they're looking to stand up before the mobile outreach professionals program funding runs out is a regional response team, and that's being done and headed up through fire and police agencies regionally. And then the other element that was on there was the Two Rivers Behavioral Health Center. And if the mental health sales dollars end up supporting that fully, there may not be a need there, but staff is recommending a $2 million reserve for any kind of buy-in for those services here regionally. Boys and Girls Club building, there are several improvements that have been requested and a facility walkthrough has been completed. So this is a city facility that's obviously housing some very important services for education and childcare, and oftentimes feeding these children several meals throughout the day. And then a new item on here, we were recently approached by Franklin County, who had indicated that they're going to actually spend some of their Arpa funding on improvements to the Hapo Center. So more details are listed in your packet, but as City Manager Zabel stated, more need than we have funds available, which is not necessarily new, but those are the projects that we would like are requesting priority and discussion on tonight.
Thank you for that. Any questions or comments from our council? Councilman Serrano.
Thank you, Ms. Mayor. In looking at the Boys and Girls Club, if we set aside $500,000, that's really low. It seems to me that we're really going to have to prioritize. That's only less than 30%, or right around 30%. And just looking at ADA accessibility, fire and sprinkler install, now we're sitting at almost all of that entire amount of money. Has staff created a priority list of what really has to be done to maintain compliance with regulations and standards? And if so, have we penciled that out?
We do have a priority list from the Boys and Girls Club as operators there, and many of it includes safety improvements, but also building improvements, deferred maintenance. Some of it is desirable improvements for the children that have been expressed at the club itself. As far as going through sort of a code analysis to price out what would be needed from a life safety standpoint, that has not been done. But certainly with whatever appropriation the council deems appropriate, we can chip away at those issues with the Boys and Girls Club in tandem.
Okay. Probably just leave your mic on. So in looking at Boys and Girls Club and seeing, I would say, kind of similar use facilities or the Mlk Center, I certainly don't think we're going to be able to fund all of the $3 million out of those two. And so with that, I think the question that I would have is, do we have a projection of whether or not Boys and Girls Club would serve a broader swath of the city than MLK? Or is it on par? Have we done any demographics look as to whether or not who in the city would be using these facilities, how frequently? I mean, I think from my perspective, you know, I'd like to know, I mean, if $1.5 million got Boys and Girls Club and we dropped MLK, but the use was spread across the entire city from Boys and Girls Club, or it had 6 extra programs, or those are the things that I think I would like to know before I commit a certain or opine on where the level of funding should be. Do we have that type of analysis of programs offered and service level, I guess?
I think we can certainly get that from Boys and Girls Club. The MLK Center is served by Benton Franklin Head Start and YMCA, so organizations with similar missions, but certainly different organizations serving different people. So yeah, we would have to look at, I know the Boys and Girls Club is a consistent daily use, even during school off periods like spring break and things like that. And it's used well into the evening up until 7 p.m. Mlk Center is utilized by YMCA and Benton Franklin Head Start based upon their schedule, which we can certainly find what their usage is. I know that's changed since COVID and some of the facilities closures, but we can certainly come back with that information of programming and usage.
I appreciate that. Those are kind of my general thoughts on this. I mean, I know we did request funds from the legislature on the Mlk Center, and I'd hate to kind of turn away from that. But again, I mean, the Hapo Center is used by all of both sides of the river, right? You know, you look at that. Boys and Girls Club, if that's used at a higher level, that might be higher impact. And then certainly mental health with the new tax coming in, it might be really critical that we have that money to partner. So I'm kind of looking at my priorities, and honestly, it's kind of escalating from the bottom up.
Mayor Pro Tem Maloney.
Thank you, and thank you, Councilmember Serrano, for those questions. I think one of the things I think we can also say is that we've also been in our federal funding. Our senators were able to fight for about was it $3 million in federal funding as well in the new budget. So we actually have a total of $4 million coming from our state and federal partners, and those do have some strings attached. So I would certainly want to make sure we don't. That's a lot of money, so we want to make sure we got good bang for the buck out of that. So I think not only is that a good commitment for you know a portion of the community that really needs some assistance. So I would you know recommend that we certainly look at funding that full project. Now, I think one of the things that's really important in this is that we know we have some excess properties that we've been looking at getting rid of that are not in our current plan for our current revenue streams. I think some of those maybe shoring up we might be able to meet all these needs, maybe not through Arpa specifically, but might be able to help out with some of those and keep, you know, some of those assets that are in a regional sort of locale along with the projects that would serve that same portion of the community. So I think we can get to most of them. I will say with the Hapo Center improvements, in spite of having served on the Hapo Center advisory board this is my 5th year, this is news to me. So we as an advisory board have not had a chance to even look or prioritize this. So I can't in good faith recommend we use any of the ARPA funds for this at this point in time until the very group that's supposed to report back to this council and provide advice has had a chance to look at that priority list and understand what those facility needs are. I've personally been asking for a capital improvement list for the Hapo Center for 3 going on 4 years now. And so, yeah, so I'll just leave that there. But anyways, nonetheless, I pretty well agree with the city staff's recommendations here. I think again, if we can find some additional sources of funding through sales of some of our excess properties that are currently unbudgeted and would otherwise go back to the general fund, all these are really priority items. So if we can use that to finish out the additional funding that Boys and Girls Clubs need and complete the Mlk Center, we're not far off on this list. And this is a really, really good list of projects that'll benefit our kids and that'll benefit our community. So I think that's where I think we should go. We should be able to fill these out and fill out with some of the excess funds. So.
Thank you. Councilman Mill.
Yeah, I'd agree that I do agree with everything that's said, that this is a great list. I'm definitely all on board with this. I will want to give a plug out for the Boys and Girls Club. There was a time where I was a single father raising my 2 daughters by myself, and the Boys and Girls Club really came in handy. It was tough to keep working and then also rush home to pick the kids up from school. So them being able to have an after-school program and be active and help with the homework, it was a really big part of my life and something I will never forget. So for me, that really moves that one up just because it really helped me get through a critical time in my life. So that's my 2 cents. Thank you.
Councilman Campos and then Councilwoman Roach.
Thank you, Mayor. This is just, I wouldn't call it a loaded question, but is there anything on this list or anything not on this list that we think might be beneficial? Just food for thought. We don't have to talk about it here, but I'm open to whatever. I think that you guys have done a good job laying the foundation for this program because this was before my time. And I'm basically in agreement with everything we've discussed so far, but I would just be curious if there's maybe some we're not looking at yet.
I can speak a little bit to some of our early work. We did some solid brainstorming as a council on what we were looking for from previous council, obviously, sorry, as to what those priority items are. And I've been tracking those pretty closely as we've gone through the process, looking for what fell off that was brainstormed by this group and kind of received consensus. And I'll be honest, most of the ones that have fallen off fell off because of technical reasons or other funding mechanisms, or the items that can't be funded through ARPA. That was a number of them. Obviously, I would very much love those life safety systems item that we need Treasury guidance on. It's been very clear, unfortunately, that that's just not really a good use of the allowable use of that. So honestly, this is really whittled down to what's left of our original wish list, I think, in a large way.
Councilwoman Wright.
I would just say that, looking at this list, my priorities are about every single one except for that last. And I just wanted to add to the conversation here about Mlk Center, housing, YMCA, and then some sports programming. And I know after serving on the United Way Grant Review Board, YMCA continued to provide childcare services to those that worked at Tyson. So a lot of our Pasco residents and continue to keep meat and food for us in grocery stores while, COVID was happening. So I think there is most definitely a priority for me there to continue supporting this renovation, whatever it looks like, ends up looking like. And I think there's a lot of potential there. And then as well as Boys and Girls Club, I just know, somebody who also uses Boys and Girls Club myself, but this facility in particular is old and it's definitely in need. So I think there are two different age groups, both worthy programs and facilities. So I'm there. And obviously we've been, as a council, really united on business improvements. And so I think we still stay there as well for priority. So that's what I've got.
Thank you.
So, good, thank you, Mayor Pro Tem, for clarifying. I just wanted to throw something else out there then. So, again, I probably heard Michelle Holt's speech probably about 3 times now, and I'm going to say it, I still struggle to figure out what gaps they fill. You asked a really loaded, pointed question, and her answer was, I need staff. So I'm asking council if there's an opportunity for the UC that they can maybe apply for extra grants. Let me know and I'll take that back to them. And maybe we can get some of these fully funded. Again, I struggle to understand if that's actually what they do, but I'll try.
City Manager Dave.
I think I'm picking up from the conversation that I use Deputy Mayor's term, this is a solid list, right? And I think there's probably 1 or 2 on these. One certainly could go now, and that would be the phase 1 business improvements. That seems like that's pretty consistent with what the council's been discussing. That's a safe one. We know it's allowed by the ARPA rules, and there's really not a whole lot of reason to hold that one back. We need to probably evaluate maybe the availability of some other resources. The Deputy Mayor also mentioned we do have some property sales potentially underway that could make a difference and provide a source of revenue for some of these projects. A couple of these we probably need to flesh out a bit. I think there are some good questions on the Boys and Girls Club building, and maybe a bit of a prioritization. Maybe there's a phase 1 and a phase 2 to that that we could bring back to you. And then a couple of them just kind of need to percolate for a bit for other things to happen. For instance, the regional mental health issue. We don't know where that's going to be. I think we need to reserve some money for it. Probably doesn't necessarily have to be all ARPA, maybe only part of it's ARPA money, but we have some time. We have till 2026? 2024 to obligate, and end of 2026 to actually spend it, right? Yeah, so we have a little bit of time to make some of these decisions, and our list is it's solid. We kind of know where we're going on this. We have more need on our list than necessary, and so no need to look for other resources because those are things that the council seems to want to have happen. So I think our first order of business would be to bring back that phase one business improvement program. And maybe a little bit more information over the next month or two for council to look at for some of the other, couple of the other projects. Thank you for the direction.
One more comment from Councilman Serrano.
Thank you. Can we get some clarity on where exactly we are with that third item, the business improvement phase two? I see that we're still seeking guidance from Treasury, but I mean, has that advanced? Do we have any kind of conditional ideas of where we'd like to be with that?
Yeah, literally, that is the fire
Right.
suppression system.
Right.
And we are where we're at is we have a request for guidance in from Treasury. There is nothing in the guidance that allows you to do it. Finance staff, the director and the deputy director sat in on a couple different presentations, one of them nationwide, able to ask questions of our local, regional, federal ARPA folks, as well as, I think you guys got a question in on the national one?
Yes, we've tried several approaches. Some of it a pre-question or pre-presentation question submitted by Darcy and myself over multiple of the national and statewide seminars or webinars. We also have a ARPA roundtable ran by AWC, which is Association of Washington Cities, and just trying to learn from different ways of interpreting this bill. Unfortunately, with the Treasury, all we keep getting, and I think we're on our third response at this point, is that go back to the guidance. We are hopeful that in the next year they will be staffing up and making the program look like a normal grant program where you do have a point of contact. But unfortunately, at this point, we are essentially being redirected back to the final guidance, the interim guidance that has been issued, where this type of activity is either not allowed or explicitly not allowed.
I appreciate that, and I'm just going to summarize what I just heard because I think it's critical that we speak with absolute clarity on this point. It's been a point of contention with several business owners. So what I just heard, and I want to reiterate this just to make sure, we have sought 3 times guidance from Department of Treasury, and 3 times we've been told it's either explicitly not allowed or likely unallowed. And until that guidance changes from Treasury, these are unallowable reimbursed costs, correct?
That is correct.
Okay, so for those who are potentially watching, that's where we sit with this. We have sought interpretation from the funding source who has disallowed this. So we will continue to seek additional clarification, or as guidance is advised, we will implement what's appropriate. Presently, under the conditions, not allowable.
Okay, any further comments? Well, I do actually want to add my comments before we move forward. We clearly have a list of priorities. And there's some on here that, like several others have already mentioned, are very important in our community. They serve different demographics. You've mentioned that. The Mlk Center and the Boys and Girls Club Center. And just like Councilman Milne, I too was served by those services that they offer for my kids before and after school and during the summer. I think they are very important organizations within our community, but I also know that they receive funding from other sources, organizations, funds, sponsorships, donations from bigger corporations. So although they are extremely important, maybe, move some other items up on the list. Again, it's not wanting to take away from the important services that they offer within our community, but yes, on exploring other options for funding as far as that goes. Definitely need to address the business improvement situation going on. So Those are my 2 cents on those services on this list. Any further comments? Looking like there's no more comments on this. Do we have clear direction?
I believe so.
Perfect, thank you. So moving on to item G.
Mayor, may I suggest a 5-minute break? We've been at this for about 2 hours, and it might be good for everyone to stretch their legs.
Absolutely, we will take a 5-minute break, returning at 9:04. Thank you. Thank you, and we are back in session with our last items on the agenda. Item G, Resolution Bid Award Riverview East Sewer Lift Station, Director Worley.
Good evening, Madam Mayor, members of council. Some of you may recall this item in terms of a previous presentation that staff provided, probably about a year or two ago, related to the sewering of the county donut hole areas, and the council giving direction or approval to kind of pursue that further, and with the idea that we could develop the UGA area in those donut hole areas more densely if they were able to be served by sewer. So this is one of those two projects that were discussed previously. And after further discussion and design and research, we had a consultant design a lift station that will serve 267 equivalent residential units. And you can see on the map here where it is. It's just north of Court Street, right at Road 52 and Pearl Street, right on the area of the property that the city owns where a future park will be. And the lift station will run a force main all the way over to a manhole in Road 48. And that's the closest place that we could get into a gravity main. If we could go to the next slide, please. These are the properties that have been identified as potential future developments that could be served by this lift station. And so those are the 267 equivalent residential units, we call them, that will be served. Number 4 that you see there is already in the preliminary plat stage, and there are 56 ERUs planned for that one already. So we're excited to be able to provide that sewer service for them. The project was designed by one of our consultants. It was put out to bid, and we had several bidders, and the lowest responsible bidder was Big D's Construction, and his bid came in at less than the engineer's estimate. So if council has any questions, I'd be glad to answer them, and if council is supportive, we'll bring this back next week for approval.
Thank you. We do have a question or comment from Mayor Pro Tem Maloney.
Yes, thank you, Director Worley. And of course, I do remember this item, but I could use a reminder as to how we're funding this one.
This is being funded through the sewer fund, and we have a bond that we had previously received for some utility work, and we're using some of the rest of that bond money for this project.
Okay, I know at one point in time we talked about potentially some local funding and LIDs. There we go. That's the acronym I was looking for. So it looks like we're below a number there that this makes sense to fund it directly as opposed to going through the administrative burden that would take.
Yeah, I think the idea would be that any future connections to this system, there would be a proportionate share of the cost of the lift station and the force main applied to each of the developments that would connect into it. So we're funding it now and get it reimbursed later.
I would just add that the gravity from the north into the lift station is going to be built by others. We're basically the developer of the 55 lot subdivision. So.
Great. I like it when growth pays for growth. Thank you.
Any further questions or comments? Okay.
I'd have a question, sorry. Just for future developments or future residents who do want to tap into this, because this may make sense for a developer, but what happens when it's just an individual who maybe neighbors one of the enumerated green highlighted areas? Is that?
The green highlighted areas shown on this map are undeveloped parcels at the moment. And so we've looked at how we could serve those. We would have to look at potential future increases in the lift station if we were to try to serve homes that are currently on septic fields, depending on how many there are, whether it be worth expanding the lift station to accommodate them. But right now, that lift station is provided for new development, not existing development.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Looks like there's no further comments, so we'll see that at the next agenda. And with that, we move on to item H on the agenda, ordinance amending Pasco Municipal Code related to corner lot fencing, CA 2021-009. Director White.
Thank you, Madam Mayor and Council. And this item involves a code revision to our existing corner lot fencing regulations. Currently, our municipal code regulates a height of corner lot fencing with a provision that makes the setback on the street side yard of the fence dependent on the location of the building on the neighboring lot. I'm not sure how that got into our Pasco municipal code, but it's been there for quite some time and has prevented, or it's caused some restrictions that probably aren't keeping in the best in terms of best practices and code regulation. The Planning Commission devoted a considerable amount of resource to this issue and has been examining it through workshops and public hearings since August of last year. They have come up with a recommendation for a code revision that's contained in the ordinance. It establishes an addressing protocol for corner lots and then a very safe and consistent setback for fences over 3.5 feet in height of 15 feet on the non-address street side yard. Again, the agenda packet contains a considerable history on the evolution of the Planning Commission's recommendation. And I'll probably leave it at that unless council has questions, and hope that I can answer those.
Any questions or comments from our council? Councilman Milne.
Yeah, thank you. As you know, I've been in this district, as in District 5. This has been one of the biggest issues I've experienced as far as getting the most complaints. As you know, the District 5 is more unique than the other districts in Pasco, and that the lot sizes are a lot larger overall compared to the other parts of the city. I know when you look at the pictures, you see most of the houses that are bunched together, which I do agree. The fence makes more sense when you have areas where you have tight, compact houses. But what is frustrating is that when you look in District 5, again, you have these big lots, big houses that basically were on the county. Now they're incorporated into the city. And to me, it's crazy. Like, say, for instance, if you look at the map, and it's kind of on here, but say from Court Street, and you got Road 60, you got Ruby where the Atkins are, where they're frustrated. But if you look on 56 in Court, you look at that intersection, that fence goes all the way out, and then you have a house. So I can't imagine that, I mean, the developer obviously put up the fence, but I can't imagine the city had no idea that that house was going to be there. So it just seems crazy that a developer could do something, yet the homeowner that wants their fence to look the same as the developer's fence, and yet now they have to go further back and they can only have a 3.5 foot fence. So I'm just saying, I'm all for safety. I'm all for, trying to do the best practices we can. I'm just saying that District 5 is a lot different than the other districts in my viewpoint, and it seems like we should have an amendment that if you have a bigger yard and that somebody from the city goes out there, it should make more sense that you could have a 6 foot fence. And I've also seen fences that were 6 foot, but they didn't get a permit. And I've heard that if there was no complaints, I mean, even though it's illegal, the people still had their 6 foot fence up. So I'm just saying it's frustrating when, as a citizen, you want to do the right way, and you do it the right way, and then they tell you, hey, you have this huge property, this massive backyard, but you can only have a 3.5 foot fence because you're on the corner lot. And then you could even look at it further that if the house across the street, in the case of the Atkins, their house, the one across the street, is facing a different direction, and their corner lot, they do have a 6 foot fence on both Ruby and on 60. So to me, it's very frustrating that, I realize that we want codes for the whole city, but when you have different areas that are totally unique, it should seem like we should have a different mechanism for those lots and for those bigger properties. So I guess this is my really frustration that we can't come to a better agreement. But I am in agreement on some of the pictures where you're showing tight development. But I'm just saying, in my district, I do feel that it's unfair to say that you have to have a 3.5 foot fence when you have this massive yard And then the safety concerns. I mean, if you have a 3.5-foot fence, somebody could pull right up and see what's going on in your backyard. Yet if your house was facing a different direction, that wouldn't be the case.
Well, just a couple of points, Madam Mayor, if I may. First of all, there is a process for relief in the case of a unique circumstance, and it's a variance through our hearing examiner. And secondly, the Planning Commission did generally take that into account. As a matter of fact, they spent a good deal of time on it. And one of the things that they did recognize was that even though the lots are large, there are still intersections with streets and with driveways that did impact their recommendation. So that was discussed at the Planning Commission, maybe not in those exact words, but the citizens that attended the hearings definitely brought those subjects up.
Comments from Councilman Campos?
Go ahead, Dave.
I just want to say, so if you go to you said there is a mechanism, how difficult is it to go to, like say, for instance, this one where they're building a fence, like in the case of the Atkins, where they're building a fence, it's basically the same type of fence as the developer had. I mean, had the developer built the fence right off the bat, would they not need to now build it? Because I mean, some people have the 6-foot fence. I mean, if you go look at the house on 60 in Court, I have no idea how they have that, and it goes way past their house. To me, that seems more of a hazard. How did that fence happen? And yet, on the same fence line, when you're going down to 60, it's totally different. Are you familiar with what house I'm talking about on Court and 56?
Well, I think I'm familiar with the fence. It's an estate wall that was put up prior to any homes being built.
Okay.
The block wall, that was a condition of the subdivision approval, and that was developer installed, yes.
Okay, I'm just saying, I mean, you probably had an idea that house was gonna be there. I mean, because it had to be there unless they totally did something totally different. It seems to me kind of frustrating that one person could have it, and then the person that's on the same development, basically, or the same type fence, they're 300 yards away, and yet they can't have that same thing. And I'm just saying, it's very frustrating for me to see it on one part, and then the next street over, it can't be that way. So that's my frustration. It doesn't seem like we have uniform. I mean, I realize it's the developer that put it up, not the homeowner, but it just very frustrating that one person has it and the other person can't. And it just seems that there should be an easy mechanism so that we make easy decisions and not have constant complaints about this person and that person, if you get what I'm trying to say.
Thank you. Councilman Campos?
I gotta admit, I've touched part of this. My name is on some of these things, and Councilman Roach can probably attest. You know, when we work on stuff like that in Planning Commission, we do really take into consideration what a lot of the citizens bring to us. And I'm gonna joke about this, but this was probably the item that drove me to take the application for council, because I didn't want to touch it. I was ready to be done talking about it after the first meeting. Because it's so complex, it was really hard to understand a lot of the stuff the staff was bringing forward to try to make recommendations, because it's not a cookie cutter, one size fits all. And I think that's how the best way to wrap your head around it is to understand that retroactively things are what they are. Fence has already been built, we're not touching those. And it will look messy. It will be one of those things where a neighbor will look at it and say, well, how come I have to do this now? Well, a fence built 6 years ago doesn't. And that's the answer, is they're grandfathered in. It made it really complex and sticky, but I want to thank staff for the hard work you guys put into this. We spent a lot of time talking about it just in one meeting, so I can only imagine if they've been talking about it since then, the length of conversation that has been taken on by it. So that's it. That's all I've got.
Councilman Serrano?
Thank you. I think where I'm really coming into not understanding this, I mean, what exactly is our safety justification for these specific setbacks and specific heights at specific locations? Whose safety are we concerned about, and how is this protected by it?
The setbacks were vetted through our engineering division. They're related to the typical speed that cars travel on residential streets, the typical place where stop bars are placed on the street themselves in relation to the stop signs, if there are stop signs, and then what's generally called a visibility triangle, that depending on the speed limit on the streets varies, of course. The higher the speed limit, the larger the triangle needs to be. So we arrived at 15 feet through examining those two variables in particular, the street design and the speed limit of the typical residential street.
Okay. And I recall seeing the picture of the triangle. That's for the property owner, the traveling vehicles, or all of the above?
Well, it's for the vehicles. And then the property owner, in the case that the triangle may affect their ability to see backing out of their driveway.
Okay. I appreciate that. Yeah, I mean, I think what's been said is quite accurate from council. You know, this is a tough situation where we have two options. I think we either can reject it or just rely on our staff from their input, as well as the planning commission. I do think it's difficult. You know, the variance goes through, as you said, Mr. White, through our appointed hearing officer. Can you talk through those processes? You apply, you have a hearing, and then, like, what are the formalized steps?
Well, you pretty much summed them up. The hearing, the application first, of course, then the hearing with the hearing examiner. I will tell council in all candor, though, that the variance process is not a process just because you don't feel like doing something. You must have some identifiable circumstance relating to your property that causes you to be able to justify an exemption to whatever the regulation is, whether it's fence location or building height or whatever. So the most difficult finding for the examiner to make is that the variance request is not caused by an action that's the result of the property owner's desires, as opposed to a property-related reason like a unique circumstance of some kind.
Okay. I appreciate that. I'm curious if there's any other more simplified mechanism for variances that would be equally legally sufficient. Not asking that to be brought in this amendment, but that might be worth future consideration. I appreciate it. Again, I recognize the effort put into this. And I hope as it's written, it will alleviate some of these concerns, albeit I'm not entirely sold on that.
Mayor Pro Tem Maloney.
Thank you, and I'll keep my comments brief. I did actually have an opportunity to listen in on one of the planning commission meetings where they were doing this. I blame COVID for that wholeheartedly. And it was really complex. Listening to the decisions and the discussions that were being made, I was having trouble following it, and I really pay attention to this stuff, and I was struggling to follow. So after let's see, at least 6 different Pasco Planning Commission meetings discussing this topic. We changed, we added one sentence to define, and then changed one sentence. Can you help me understand, Director White, in a practical perspective, what relief or extra burden is this placing on people who have brought this concern forward, that they are not satisfied with this? What does this do to or for or to them, or is it really, this is just cleaning up our own language and it really doesn't have much of a material effect at all?
Well, yeah, yes, I think it's definitely cleaning up our language. And I also think that although it may not be all that the people attending the meetings asked for, it does provide them, excuse me, with some relief in terms particularly of depending on a building that is on property you don't control, dictating where your fence is going to be. So again, it's not everything at least to the people attending the meetings, but it does provide some relief, anywhere from 5 to 10 feet typically of relief in terms of fencing going further towards the property line.
All right, thank you.
Councilman Campos?
The last time I'll speak on this, Councilman Serrano, there was a comment made by Commissioner Jerry Cochran about this, and I think this reverberates with what you're thinking is safety is a shared responsibility. It's not just the person backing up out of the vehicle. The pedestrian also should have their head on a swivel. And that kind of resonated with me. And looking at just the fact that that's going back to the code, that all they did was help clear up, kind of goes back to, I think, from the few meetings that I was able to present to this, it really just seemed confusion. Some of the people who were there didn't understand what it was we were trying to do. And that's where it kind of came back. One of the first meetings was people were convinced that at that point we were trying to tear down their fences that were already pre-existing. There was a lot of confusion that way. We weren't trying to do that. We were, trying to clean up the code. So I would just say that however we move forward, it's important that we talk to our constituents, tell them that they have something pre-existing. We're not trying to take that down. It's to clear up future-wise. And probably a handful, probably 20, that's probably a little bit extra, but if there was 20 people that were concerned about it, we're doing this to serve tens of thousands of people. So that's just food for thought.
I have a quick question just before you make your comment, City Manager. I'm not sure if this is for either of the chiefs, deputy chiefs, or Director White. These specifications in the fencing, is this also taken into consideration or maybe to allow our first responders access in case of?
I don't believe so, Madam Mayor. No, I don't believe so.
Okay.
I did just want to comment on the relief, to use the deputy mayor's word. So currently, if you had a property along that side yard next to the person that wants to build a fence, so you're on the side street behind them, you are limited by where the front of their house is. So if they have their predecessor or they themselves decided to build their house with a deep front yard, that controls where your fence can go. So one thing this does change is rather than saying the building line of the house facing the side street, it's 15 feet from the property line adjacent. So the worst case scenario is going to be 15 feet from your neighbor's property line. That's going to be the setback line. So in a lot of cases, that's probably going to provide more relief than folks have today. But it's going to be based on a case by case issue, and there could be a situation, particularly on some of these old county roads, where maybe the front yard setback is less than 15 feet, and it actually might make it a little bit worse for you. That's not the case in any of the situations that we're aware of that we've been talking about the last year or so. But as we all know, we see some of these houses that are sitting right on a street because people didn't pay attention 80, 90 years ago to where a property line might be. It might not even been an inspection. So just add that clarification.
Add another follow-up question. So basically in Kennewick and in Richland, we'd asked if people asked, do they have the same law as far as restrictions, as far as a 6-foot fence? I'm not against the setback. I'm asking about the 6-foot part on corner lots. Is Kennewick and Richland have the same? I'm just saying, if you look at Pasco, Kennewick and Richland, for the most part, we all have the same style of houses, the same, you could blindfold yourself and go around any of the 3 cities and they all look pretty much the same. It's not like, see where I'm getting at this. If we have the law or the ordinance, why doesn't the other 2 cities? And they actually have more hilly areas where ours are flat. So it seems like, I don't know. You see what I'm saying? Maybe I'm not articulating this well, but I'm just saying, do the other cities have the same ordinance?
No, they don't have the same. But I used to work in Kennewick, and Kennewick has a similar code provision for corner lots. I don't remember exactly what it details out, but it involves visibility triangles.
Okay. And then my second follow-up question, this is more of a procedural question. Will the people that are like in District 5, will they actually have an opportunity to come here as far as is there going to be like an open meeting on this so they could actually come and give their concerns as far as on this issue?
But that's probably up to Madam Mayor, Councilman. I'm not sure how she wants to conduct that. The hearings, it's legislative, it's not a quasi-judicial matter.
Okay.
So possibility, sure.
I just know that I've had a lot of interaction with, again, very frustrated residents, and they said they would like to have their due diligence and be able to come here and speak to the council. And again, I'm not advocating that. I mean, to have one ruling for the whole city, to me, is very frustrating. It shouldn't see that District 5 is being exempt, or have a thing where the city could actually come out with a couple code enforcement officers and say, hey, this makes sense. They're putting the fence 15 or 20 foot back. They should have a 6-foot fence. I'm just saying it seems it should be a little bit more easy. I mean, we want people to come here to Pasco, but again, when you have a bigger lot, I just don't think it fits the whole city. But I do agree with what you guys are saying as far as in most districts. But in my district, it should seem that we should have an easier mechanism for people to, get their 6-foot fence when they are pushing it back 15 to 20 feet from the street. So that's my big concern.
I also want to make sure council is aware that currently you can have a 5-foot fence right up to the property line. It must be 85% transparent, and it must have interspersed columns a certain feet from each other. But that is an existing code provision that remains in effect now, and with the ordinance, assuming it's adopted at some point.
I'm actually aware of that, but again, I think and the other frustration thing is, again, when you have a bigger lot and say you have a pool or you have some other things, you can have frustration that you don't have privacy. You spend a lot of money for a house and a lot of money for a nice fence, and again, most people want privacy. And then, again, it's kind of a different topic, but we have an increase of crime. And so, you just want to have one area where you actually have privacy. You don't have people looking at you wanting to jump the fence and steal your car or whatever if it's in the backyard. Again, I know it's kind of getting off topic, but I'm just saying it is nice when you have a house in Pasco and it's a bigger lot that you actually have privacy where you could, work on your car or work on your boat in the backyard, not have everybody see it as they drive by when you only have a 3.5-foot fence. So,
City Manager, did you have some comments still?
No, Mayor.
Well, any further comments? This topic seems like we need to maybe bring it back and allow for some community input. Looks like it. How do you all feel?
So if we were to bring this up to vote, it'd be just an open meeting, legislative action. We would be able to have public comment on that. Is that correct? So
that's correct.
No matter what we do, there will be an opportunity for the public to weigh in during a meeting. I would just like to point out that they had like 8 meetings on this over the last couple of years for the Planning Commission, and if this is a matter of we're bad at communicating with our residents of what's going on, then I think that's one of the topics that maybe we have on our retreat. And so in addition, we should maybe take the lesson that maybe we're not doing a good job of reaching out and giving people the opportunity to talk to the Planning Commission, which is supposed to be our body to hear these things and provide that recommendation. So if that's not working, then we need to do better at that.
Councilman
In
Campos.
addition.
The first few, Mr. and Mrs. Atkins did show up and they've talked to this. So they've had an opportunity to speak to the Planning Commission, at least for the few times that I was there. Again, staff is usually really good about making sure that notifications go out to the people who are concerned about it and on high priority items. We tend to have a good turnout. I haven't followed this closely since I left the Planning Commission, but I've wagered that the people who are concerned in your district have at least already spoken to it at the Planning Commission, but would be more than willing to go about it however you see fit, Madam Mayor.
I'd just say that it's not been just the Atkins. I've had it for years. It's been one of the biggest just because the lot sizes are bigger. So it's just been a frustration that's, and I'm very thankful for the staff as far as bringing it up. It seems like it has taken years. So I do want to say thank you, Mr. White, as far as putting effort into this. I just wish there was like an exempt this district, the rest of the city, they could have this, but just exempt District 5 and, make it just easier, just be considering that so many of the properties were in the county and now we're trying to fill in, and now we're making more city code, but the lots are still larger. So this is just my one frustration. But I do really appreciate the amount of effort that went into this. The Planning Commission. I'm not trying to diss on any of them. I'm just saying that there is frustrations if we're just going along with what basically was the same thing we've been doing for the last 30 years. So that's my 2 cents on that.
Well, Director White, City Manager, after hearing the further comments, it seems that there's been ample opportunities to speak on this. So we'll have it on the agenda as we move forward, and we'll give advice to your neighbors to come and speak again on a topic. So we'll move forward as planned. And with that, we move on to item I, Resolution Emergency Agreement for Animal Control Services, Director Ratkai.
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor and members of council. As you know, on November 11th, 2021, the Benton Franklin Humane Society took over the Tri-Cities Animal Shelter, which included operations for regional animal control, shelter operations, and personnel management. It was an urgent and emergency action, which was initiated due to the law enforcement action against the previous contractor, which prompted this unusual and unplanned transition quickly. Since that time, the Humane Society has operated the animal shelter facility here in Pasco, in addition to their own main facility in Kennewick, to the best of their ability. This attached agreement is just a ratification of the personal services agreement for them to provide services during this emergency period. It's a 6-month period. During the transition, the focus was on obviously maintaining the operations, rehiring or hiring positions that left during the transition, identifying and trying to find records, and obviously going back and forth between the city attorney and the Humane Society attorney to ratify this agreement. So we ask that this agreement be brought forth at the meeting next week for ratification and action. And yeah, any questions of council, we'll take it at this time.
Thank you for that. Any questions or comments from our council regarding this topic? Looks like there's none, so we move forward.
See you next week. Thank you.
And with that, we move on to item 6, miscellaneous council discussion. City Manager.
Council, a few items tonight. You see listed the council retreat topics. I'll get to that in just a second. I wanted to make a couple quick announcements first. One, appreciate council's indulgence on all the presentations tonight, particularly the 2 staff ones. It's been a while since we've been able to kind of give you those kind of updates, and it was nice to be able to do that. Apologize for the late hour. Sylvester Street Safety Improvement Project Open House. I wanted to mention 6 p.m. tomorrow evening at the Police Department Community Room. So we'll be taking input from the public on that proposal. And then also another workshop on Lewis Street improvements, 6 p.m. The following week, March 22nd at Salon Monte Carlo at 411 West Lewis Street. So a heads up on those 2 things. Another thing you'll obviously note that not a lot of masks tonight. Today's our first work day in 2 years where masks indoors weren't required. I'm happy to report that we were able to implement that change without incident today. We certainly did have some folks in the community and a couple of the employees exercising their option to wear masks, and we'll continue to do that. The other thing I wanted to note, as council, you look around the city hall, particularly the public-facing counters, you're going to see some, you'll see the plexiglass still up. We're in the process of having an industrial engineering review of that. One of the things we found with the guards up is a less utilization of sick leave. And while we want to be able to give folks as much option as they can, to quote the building official, a lot of times by the time the conversation's over with the person at the counter, they're both kind of down here at the window top. So we want to do a little bit better job with the opening than they are now.
But I think we also want to be mindful of the fact that that's served a purpose that we maybe didn't anticipate initially. You know, what the focus was obviously on COVID, but there's been other benefits. So trying to find that right balance between the ability to communicate and the safety aspect. So I wanted to talk a minute on retreat items. And we've kind of kept an ongoing list. There's some housekeeping items council's talked about over the past several months. The setup of the workshop, for instance, has been one. Whether we have tables down here in this open area in front and how that might be accomplished. Meeting dates and times. Individual council requests of staff and legal. The use of electronic devices. And then, you know, probably some discussion on a couple of our boards and commissions. So there's, I guess I just kind of put that under the general housekeeping topics. Then we have some public processes, particularly around proposed land use. And this is something we've been touching around the edges of for a couple of years, but the use of, for instance, large signage notification on site, the 300-foot radius for notification of land uses, sign up for the land use notifications, and I think we need a little bit of a discussion from the city attorney's office on requirements versus practices, and making sure we avoid pitfalls and that those are understood before we make significant changes. And then we have a number of issues that have come up, many of which you're working on now that we are hopeful of being able to talk to council on. And this list is really making sure everybody at the base is covered that council wants to talk about, but also if there's things you feel we don't need to talk about at retreat, because we have a day and a half, we're happy to take those off the list and just deal with them regularly on the agenda. But affordable housing issues come up, the Hapo Center, short-term rental regulations, the marijuana ban is something we've talked about discussing at the retreat. Shoreline reconveyance, public safety, capital improvements, and this has to do with both the fire stations we've been talking about as well as needed improvements out at the police facilities, police strategic master plan, and the 2 community centers. So those are kind of the list I have right now. Then, of course, the update of the council goals as to whatever policy direction council gives us on the issues, and whatever updates we have on the issues. So if there's any other items, I'd be appreciative of knowing that if we missed something here, or if there's something that I mentioned that you don't really feel we need to cover, we're far enough along, like reconveyance, maybe that's something you're not needing to talk about at the retreat, because that's kind of on its own course. Maybe it's just an affirmation that that's still a priority. So with that, any input from council be appreciated.
We have comments from Councilman Campos and then Councilman Milne.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. My work environment changed a lot today too. It was crazy. We went from mask to no mask. We have these change stations. You know, you dress out in your whites essentially, and we found, I think we're going to move forward with leaving all the plexiglass up for a different reason. Is we think that there might be an opportunity to go back, and it's cost prohibitive to then reinstall the plexiglass. And I'm sure you're thinking about that, but I want to applaud you for looking at different avenues to put those, keep those in effect, and then see the benefit to them. So that's kind of cool.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I also wanted to bring up, I'd love to have a great discussion on the homeless issue. To me, that's the number one priority. I'd love to see our new Peanuts Park kept and well, and all the money we've just invested in this whole area. So I would like to really just sit down and see what we could do to clean up the downtown and make it better. And yeah, that's probably one of my biggest issues is the homeless. It just seems to be getting more and more. So, and I know I've reached out to Dave Zabel, and he's done a good job as far as getting some of the homeless camps away from my store, but obviously they're going somewhere. So I would love to see what we could do to solve this issue. I don't know if we can, but at least have a great discussion on it.
Council, Mayor Pro Tem Maloney.
Yeah, I'll wholeheartedly echo that. That was the first thing I noticed missing from this is there wasn't any conversation about the increasing homeless population in our downtown and the effect it's having. With the amount of times we've had, frantic, it's getting frantic from the business owners downtown of how bad this is. And, I'm not sure if it's related to what happened on Sunday, but certainly, we've seen other issues that popping up for sure. So homelessness, mental health and substance abuse, understanding where we're going with some of these and the fact that we're going to have to dedicate quite a bit of time to understanding and making good policy decisions. I think we need to, as a council, wrap our heads around how do we tackle this? Who is going to be forming these work groups and doing the work for this? Is this something that we, are we looking for regional work groups to be stood up? Do we need more council member engagement because we're going to be need to be making agreements with other elected officials, or what staff do we need to do? Who do we need to delegate to on staff to form these groups? I don't know. I don't have an approach yet, but we have to tackle these. These are key issues. And then the other item I had listed was business grants for life safety systems. I agree 100% with Councilman Serrano's comments earlier about Arpa funds, but that doesn't mean there's not other avenues we could potentially tackle, and not just for life safety systems, but can the city be a part of grant programs, or is that something we can, I don't want to say subcontract to, but help fund BFCOG specifically to be able to manage and help provide some of that outreach? Or I don't know their answers, but I do know that the need is great, and we should at least explore every avenue we have as to how we can help people on that. I would recommend we remove Hapo Center from this. Again, at this stage, with the advisory board being pretty poorly informed by the facility manager there, I'm not sure if this is really ripe for full council discussion this time. Again, I've been very focused on this item for a long time, and I cannot provide this council any reasonable advice in the next 2 weeks. And I've been digging into this issue I spent a lot of time on this, so I'd like to see that perhaps maybe be deferred to another meeting and another conversation.
My one thought on having it in there, and maybe the goal is simple, is our cooperative agreement with the county expires in 2024. And so the thought was not necessarily about the capital request that they've made of us, but probably a little bit of discussion with the council about the future of that facility overall, not just immediate needs, and start to lay out a bit of a strategy with some direction from council.
Yeah, and I appreciate that. But I've been asking for that conversation for several years from staff and haven't yet had that conversation either. So again, I think we need to do a little more homework before we're there. And then shoreline reconveyance, I don't think I'm not sure if there's a meaningful conversation to have at this point in time. So I don't know if we can switch out some of those issues with the homelessness and mental health and substance abuse and those sort of things. I think that better suit us. Thank you.
Any further questions or comments?
I had a clarification question on council organizational issues, use of electronic devices beyond iPads, or what are we talking about? Or is that what we're
Talking about the use of those during public meetings.
Okay. Gotcha.
Yeah.
And then for the issues, I guess for me is that I don't see on here is transportation and funding for transportation improvements as an issue or topic.
Any further comments?
Can you elaborate? Are you talking about the public transportation, or are we talking about roadway improvements, all of the above?
Roadway improvements and funding for that we didn't fully see come through in the last legislative session that we still know needs addressing, and we're not going to get it this session. So what's the plan?
Just a clarification, are we also talking about the connectivity issues? I know this came up a couple different times as far as connectivity through Pasco.
I'm talking about downtown and pedestrian and bikeways and pathways and things like that. Is that the connectivity you're speaking of?
Yeah, we've talked about connectivity through like developments and that how it would affect the developer as far as extra costs because it'd have less lot space.
I wasn't thinking about that aspect of it, but mostly just the as I said before. But I guess in talking about downtown Pasco, to me, that is an important part of transportation, is for those that are accessing that area by bike and by foot. So
I'd like to have the conversation. I would be willing to take off the shoreline reconveyance and the Hapo Center. Be nice to have an update on the shoreline reconveyance, but I think we're pretty much all in the same spot as we were a couple years ago. So
Agreed. Councilman Campos.
Speaking of connectivity, I have an opportunity for maybe you, Zara, as an alternate. So I was contacted by Washington Walkability Initiative.
I'm gonna get my steps in.
Yeah, maybe. Mr. Zabel, could you elaborate? So they asked, we were contacted by Washington Health District to kind of talk about some stuff. Can you elaborate a little bit?
It's, the city of Pasco was invited to participate in a walkability assessment, multidisciplined effort through the health district. And specifically, because he's our liaison, or council's kind of guru on transportation issues, Councilmember Campos was invited.
So there's a 5-day workshop in Olympia sometime, and I've got a soft yes on that. So I'm looking for an alternate that might be able to fill in for that. I talked with the group. We did a quick little workshop, talked about cities that we think are really accessible, and not just walkability, but like you're talking ADA compliant, lots of other, for aging groups of people, so stuff like that. So you'd made some interest before, and so if you'd be interested as an alternate, I'd be happy to loop you in, or if anybody else is curious to kind of see what we're talking about, I can share some more information. But we just had a kickoff meeting the other day, so some of that stuff's happening. All right.
It's in the books. Okay. Further questions or comments? City Manager.
Mayor, just the one comment is, and I want to make sure that expectations for the council, are met. And, of course, what we're working on is updating our goals. So we're, we do spend, for instance, we spend a lot of time on transportation. We spend a lot of time on the CIP on transportation. The connectivity issue is an issue of its own that's working its way through the Planning Commission and up through the City Council. And we spent we're going to be updating the 6-year transportation improvement plan in June. And so the retreat really isn't to necessarily solve all the problems, it's to develop goals on how we're going to start approaching the problem. So if we were to take this list and have in-depth conversations on the dozen or so things, issue papers on here, a day and a half would not be long enough. So really what we're trying to do is get to what's the priority here and what's our goal, and then from that we start to develop solutions and plans and projects or whatever programs to get us to that goal. So really goal identification and adjustment is the big thing right now. So we do have a pretty high priority on transportation in the council goals already. Certainly they probably need to be updated, but whether or not transportation is a priority, I think that is a priority of this council, and it's already pretty well reflected in your goals. Again, might need to be updated, but so that's why not everything on our list in the back of the room is on this list, because it's already on the list. So this is stuff that probably really wasn't reflected a lot in that list. So.
Okay. Any further comments? Okay. Go ahead.
Yes, City Manager Zabel, could you, I know we can't get into the details of the officer-involved shooting on Sunday. It's neither appropriate during an investigation, but what comments can we as a city share on that? I know this is concerning a lot of people, especially people that live in that area. I know my wife and I literally walked past that spot on Friday, almost exactly 2 days before the incident. The next day, I brought my daughter down to Phoenix Park for the grand opening, and 2 blocks west of that was, So I just wonder what can we say about that right now? And yeah,
I'm going to ask Deputy Chief Cook to update us.
So the crime that initially occurred is going to be included with SIU's investigation. We don't know a lot about the cause of the incident. I do know that we have a lot of focus in that downtown area with our patrolmen, addressing a myriad of issues. So I would still feel comfortable down there, but I think, as always, you need to be aware of your surroundings and take care of yourself and call when it's important to do that. The incident itself, probably it isn't appropriate to say much about it, but it is under investigation, and I have a lot of confidence in that.
Chief, could I ask you a question? And,
Sure.
you know, please don't feel compelled to answer it, but is it fair to say, or can we say that this was an issue between two people and wasn't a random attack? Or can we not go into that right now?
I'm not sure that that's clear, but
Okay.
that,
All right, well, thank you. I guess my statement to people who are watching and who are worried about this is we as a council are taking this seriously, and there's little we can say that we can't undo this. Certainly I think we all continue to support our officers, and this is hard. I can only imagine how hard it is to have to take a life like that. So certainly my heart goes out to our officers and the victims' families and loved ones. But when we're talking about homelessness, we're talking about mental health and substance abuse. I don't know if these are linked to this case in specific, but these are issues that the reason why we're talking about them is because they do matter, and they are part of the safety of downtown, and we have to do better than this. And I don't know what that looks like yet, but I know that I don't have any more important issue that I want to focus on over the next couple of years than this. We have to make downtown safe. It's so important, not just because it's my district, but because I like my downtown. I like the investments we're doing. It's important. It's historic, and it's a center and the identity in many ways of anchoring the city. And this sort of events just really sets us back, and I hope that we can prevent, as best we can, future events. So I hope we can have a very healthy discussion about this at the retreat. And I don't know if we can come up with any answers, but hopefully we can set the right goals and the right teams up to do what we can to try to reduce this issue, fight this issue as best we can. So anyways, that's just my thoughts. So again, thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Any further comments? Okay. Well, again, just want to reiterate that we are in support of our police department. We also send our hearts and prayers out to the families affected by this crime. There's really no other way to label it. And to our community, the neighbors, please be aware of your surroundings, stay safe, and if you see anything suspicious, do not hesitate to reach out to our police department. So just be safe out there. And moving on to item 7 on our agenda, we do have need for an executive session for 10 minutes. Discussion with legal counsel about legal risk of current or proposed action per RCW 42.30.110 ILI. And so with that, we will be in session with our city manager or city attorney for 10 minutes, and we'll return at 10:10.
The CD director will be included in that as well.
Yes, sir. And council meeting has reconvened at 10:11:04. And with no further business, the meeting is adjourned. Thank you, everyone, that stuck around this long. Have a great evening. Also, it's great to see everyone's faces without a mask.